All right, good morning. Today is Thursday, September 28th, calling this Utilities Committee to order. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Casey.
Present.
Spencer.
Present.
Bishop.
Here.
Ray. Harsh.
Here.
Kelly. Valencia. Mr. Chairman, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Good morning to our guests today. We have two pieces of legislation that are before us today. One is legislation regarding something for Cleveland Public Power. The other one is Sci-Fi. So with all due respect to our guests, I want to do the legislation on Cleveland Public Power first, and then we'll get into the presentation from Sci-Fi. So Director, if you can come up. Ordinance number 432, 2023 by council members Casey and Griffin by departmental request, an emergency ordinance authorizing the purchase by one or more requirement contracts of materials, equipment, supplies, and services needed to maintain, repair, or replace components of electrical, transmission, and distribution systems, including labor for the Division of Cleveland Public Power, Department of Public Utilities for a period of 2 years. We did hold this once in May. Held May 11th and the 18th. And at this time, Director, we're bringing it back. So do you have anything to say?
Yes, thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. Good morning. With me at the table, Bernie Jackson, as all of you hopefully know, Assistant Commissioner of the Division of Cleveland Public Power. Commissioner Danielson is out of town, long planned out of town, so apologies for that. But Bernie is in charge as of today. As previously discussed, Ordinance 432, 2023, we're seeking authority to engage in requirement contracts to augment existing staff of Cleveland Public Power in the event of inclement weather, in the event of scheduled new customer transition. The thing that Council is well aware of, when first we heard this, and there was a unfortunate incident at St. Clair across from the Justice Center. So the CAs, which is what we call these requirements contracts at DPU, the CAs were there doing the work for water and water pollution control, but CPP did not have the flexibility to do that, unfortunately. So we had to call those crews off of other crews, and it's a real life example, which is why I'm sharing it with Council, that they had to stop doing what they were, because it was a very planned restoration of that very complicated failure in the street, that when CPP, they had to pull off other jobs to come and do that in the time frame that we needed them, and it was stressful on both our existing jobs, on the employees, and on the project leads of the restoration of that, as we had the Cleveland Marathon looming over our shoulder. Another tool in the toolbox that the Commissioner and the Assistant Commissioner can utilize in the event of an emergency like that is time-consuming and logistically challenging, in the event of a significant event, as we all experienced a couple of weeks ago. Again, a resource that we use throughout, including at CPP for the 138 kV underground pipe type cable. We have requirements contracts that augment existing staff. In no way is this going to, in our opinion, take work away from our employees. It's something that we use on a regular basis throughout the Division of Public Utilities to get the work done for our customers, and we're seeking authority to do that in this instance.
All right, thanks, Director. Just to reiterate, this is only to be used in emergency situations, and it's not to replace current employees.
That is correct. Another example, Chairman, and I didn't think of it until now, I was recently at the table talking about the 480 volt LED smart photo cells. So currently, thanks to your authority on Monday, we can engage with that vendor to find out when delivery will happen, and then the installation of it. If our trouble crews are busy, or LTLs are tied up somewhere, and we have these, we can utilize this contract to do those conversions, because as Council was, when I said hope it works, right? A vendor of this sort, with the proper technology and training, can convert that photo cell while our trouble crews are restoring service to customers or doing other work. So this would also include something like that, a scheduled upgrade, but again, it's just an augmentation of existing workforce. We want to hire everybody you can bring us. This is not this is not a way around that, Chairman, to
All right.
the members.
That's the only question I have.
I'll refer to Councilman Owens,
All
and
right.
then I'll ask my question. Thanks.
All right, Councilman Polensek.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, my honorable colleagues, and to the director, and to Mr. Jackson. I don't have to tell you what my community went through during that storm. 5 days without power. And I became the call center for Cleveland Public Power that day, for those 5 days, because of the call center and the director acknowledged that there is a problem, and has been a problem with the call center. So we've been hearing this for 3 years. So I'm hoping at some point that that's going to get rectified soon, because that was just outrageous what customers had to go through. Now, let me preface this. I've always been a supporter of Cleveland Public Power. I'm the only person left here who walked the street to campaign to save Cleveland Public Power. I'm it. I've always been a supporter of Cleveland Public Power. When I ran for office, I indicated I was a supporter of Cleveland Public Power. And so that 5 days, what I went through in my community, and then to have so little response by CPP crews upset me to no end. My citizens lost everything in their refrigerators, everything in their freezer. I'm still dealing with people who allege their appliances got cooked when the power came back on. Now are filing moral claims. But there's two things I want to get clarified here. Again, I've been here a long time, and I understand the rules as well as anyone in this body or on the other side of the hall. During a storm, emergency situation, the city has the authority to go out for emergency work. We've done it repeatedly over the years. When I was council president, the administration came to me needing my sign-off for emergency work. I could not understand for the life of me why there was no effort made to bring in outside contractors to help restore power. I was in contact virtually daily with the council president, who indicated there was no request made of him by the administration to sign off on any request for outside vendors, outside support, et cetera, et cetera. So that's one path I want you to address. The other path was, on the Sunday after the storm, as I was out every day, I only found two crews, 4 employees working in the entire northeast side. And one of the workers told me, this was Sunday, that folks would not report to work, that employees would not report to work. Now, I come to work every day. When I was a United Auto worker, I came to work every day. And when I heard that from one of our own crew members saying people would not come to work, that was it with me. That was it with me. Because my folks were suffering. I had people who had to leave their homes because they didn't have family to stay with, had to go into motels, hotels, try to find friends. I had people on breathing devices. So what I experienced those 5 days did not make me one happy camper, neither have my residents, because I just saw I was at a neighborhood meeting where they brought letters, which then they wanted me to deliver to the mayor's office. But citizens are treating upset. They lost money. Their lives were disrupted. And I understand the severity of the storm. But as I indicated, I have First Energy CEI in my ward as well. Not one call from a First Energy customer, not one email. They had private contractors in the eastern portion of my ward. Not one call, not one, you know why? Because they were telling their customers constantly what to expect, when they thought power was going to come on. Plus, people could see the private contractors out in the neighborhood. So again, I want to know why there was no effort made from the mayor's office, the administration to come in with private, to augment and help us with the outage. And then I need to understand this about employees wouldn't come to work, wouldn't show up.
Chairman, if I may.
Director?
Thank you, through the chairman to the council member. A lot of points, some accurate, some not.
Okay.
So all due respect.
Okay.
Right? But I will address the first question, which is the charter provision that allows for a mayor's emergency, which I
Okay.
believe that you are alluding to.
I'm alluding to that.
Which, to my knowledge, has happened once under the Bibb administration, possibly twice, which is it's an empowering portion of our charter without a doubt. And we spoke of it, when I was in your neighborhood on that Sunday, I thought I addressed it very clearly, that it had the council president signed a mayor's emergency, and Mayor Bibb signed a mayor's emergency on that Friday.
Yeah.
What was I, as the Director of Public Utilities, supposed to do with it? We were calling these contractors. We were asking I have to then go out and seek bids for the work. We didn't have time to do that. So I understand your point on the mayor's emergency. However, it would not have turned one customer on sooner. In all due respect, a mayor's emergency are for those instances where existing city resources do not exist and the legislative body is not meeting for us to seek authority. We can get those requisite, the chairman of finance, the council president, the mayor of the city of Cleveland then gives me, the director of public utilities, the authority to circumvent the legislative process in order to secure the necessary equipment, in most instances, emergency remediation cleanup when it's environmental, which we've seen and hopefully will not again, or the instance of the unique transformer for a very important customer of Cleveland Public Power, which we did. But in that instance, there was nobody who would respond to a mayor's emergency, which I am still required to seek a bid price and then bring it to council within, I think it's the next regularly scheduled meeting. So I am also very familiar with the mayor's emergency provisions and know it would not have helped, in my opinion, but we learn. As we talked about last week, we learn from everything, right? This is an imperfect science when we deliver services to our customer. This is something we work really, really hard at, but we can continue to learn. And in my opinion, at the time in your driveway on Sunday to sitting here today, it wouldn't have helped. However, it is well taken, and I appreciate the conversation continuing here at the table. As it pertains to our customers in your ward or the private contractors that were responding, and we saw them, Bernie saw them, Bernie talked to them from Kentucky, from Indiana, from Michigan, that were coming in. They might have been private contractors, but those were First Energy employees with a different name. Because the Toledo Edison, whatever the names were, did respond. And maybe they were on sooner than us in your neighborhood, but they certainly weren't in the city of Cleveland. Our communication strategy, which we need to do better, I acknowledged last week when we talked about this. There are things we're going to learn and we're going to do better. Corey Jones, our manager of the call center, is here with us this morning, who worked all weekend. Her staff came in and did everything they possibly could. Shelley Shockley in Margaret's shop at Public Affairs Communications is here. Margaret Jackson is here because we know how important this is and we know where we need to get better. And that is part of it. This ordinance we're considering today is part of it from an operations side to give Bernie another tool, right? Communications, operations. First Energy was telling people on Friday at 1 o'clock in the morning that they can anticipate restoration of service by Friday, 7 days later. 7 days. We can do that. But you will have me at this table in very bad, if I told you 7 days, at least I'm telling you something through the chairman of the councilman, right? If I make a an assertion that, yeah, well, you'll be back on in 5 days. The majority, 93 to 95% of our outages are restored within 4 hours. 4 hours. This was a significant event. I could have easily said next Thursday. If it would have made it wouldn't have made one of our customers happy if I said next Thursday. All due respect, through the chairman of the council member, we do, and I said it, and I will continue to say it. Those employees that worked that storm worked their tails off, and they stayed safe, and that's important. Those employees should be commended. Corey Jones should be commended, the call center staff, the meter staff who was out at the pole at 55th and St. Clair when it was at a 60-degree angle, 130,000 volts of power, precariously hanging from a pole which was not stuck in the earth, which how it should have been. Not one person was out, so they might not have been in Collinwood, and I apologize, but had that pole gone down, people would have gotten hurt, and significant portions of our system would have been dark for a very long time. So was it perfect? No. Is this ordinance going to make it perfect? Absolutely not. But do we appreciate the support of the longest serving member of this body? We do. And do we hope that it continues? Without question. That's why I'm sitting here today. Your support historically, council's support as we sit here to acquire new customers, to expand our footprint, to compete door to door with a for-profit $11 billion entity. Yes, we need our council members' support. We need our mayor's support. We believe that this ordinance will take one step closer to that. All due respect, through the chairman to the council member.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Mr. Chairman, honorable colleagues. I never questioned the performance of the workers that were on the scene, as you know. I appreciate it, and I thank the four that I ran into that day. So at the end of the day, tell me how this legislation that is before us, how in a storm situation, how does this legislation help us?
Director?
Through the chairman of the council member, in the event that operationally the commissioner or the assistant commissioner identifies a tree down on whatever the street was called, right? You and I were both there on Monday.
Yeah.
That tree down can be assigned, in the event of no other available resources, can be assigned that job to restore those 210 customers that were affected by that feeder at that time. They would be under contract. They would be required to respond within an amount of time with the resources that we know they need, that we have the price for, and the amount of time that we're going to allot them to get the job done. That's what this contract is anticipated to give us the flexibility to do. After we've called in every single lineman, bucket truck driver, apprentice, lineman, splicer, after we've exhausted all other available resources, the commissioner and the assistant commissioner could utilize this, hopefully, to respond to that and provide the service to our customers.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, to the director, and you're telling the committee that 500,000 is going to do that?
Through the chairman of the council member, I'm going to tell you it's a start.
Start. Okay, so let's get back to the elephant in the room. Did employees refuse to come to work?
Every available resource worked as hard as they possibly could. They didn't refuse. I'm not here to tell you somebody refused. We did not have that conversation, but did every single lineman and employee of Cleveland Public Power respond to the overtime calls? The answer is no.
Okay, because that's what I was told by the folks in the mayor's office. That's what I was told by one of the linemen, emergency guys out there, that people were not reporting, did not report to come in. That's why they were in the situation they were in out there on the northeast side. So I'm not going to, to me, that to me, I'm required to come to work, regardless of the weather, regardless of the circumstances. I understand one guy that was out there said, I'm leaving shortly because I've been out here all night. He left in the afternoon. I understand. He was out there all night working. Forced rest. Okay? I don't recall his name, but so when I came back later in the afternoon, there was only three, because the one said this guy was just totally burnt out from working as long as he did. But I personally, my residents, will not accept the fact that in an emergency hazardous condition, where employees would not show up. That's unacceptable to me. That's unacceptable to me. Police officers are required, emergency circumstances, to come to work. Firefighters, EMTs, I could go right on down the list. Virtually every city crew, every department in an emergency situation. So as the longest supporter left here at City Hall of Clean Public Power, I don't have to tell you how I took that. How I took that. My folks were out of power. I had trees down. I'm still dealing with stuff. Yesterday I'm still dealing with stuff. I mean, so at the end of the day, if you're telling this councilman and my colleagues here that you believe this legislation before us is going to help address a similar type situation in the future, then I'm totally in support of it.
Thank you.
I'm totally in support of it, because I'm not going to go through what I went through. And then we'll get in, and then at some point, Mr. Chairman, I hope we get into the call center, whole issue with that call center again, because I became the call center that day. At one time, I had saved 82 phone calls. At one time, I had 82 saved phone calls because I was using a hard line and 2 cell phones trying to make, as the director knows, getting my constant emails and phone calls. I never want to go through that again, what I experienced with my constituents. So if this is the piece that you think is going to help us, which I heard from Chief Davey, that this legislation is critical in responding to emergency situations, then I'm 100% in support of it, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councilman
If I
Feinstein.
may, I mean, I'm not hiring call center staff on this contract.
Yeah.
The call center, there's no
No, I'm not-
call center
I
in the
understand. No,
world that can
that's for
accommodate.
another day.
I could talk about it right now because they worked hard too, but there's no call center in the world that could take 12,000 customers out at 12:05 a.m. on a Friday. The upfront messaging, which outlines exactly who is out and what we know, is the intention of upfront messaging. If they're listening to the message, they understand, we know you're out. And if there's sparks, if there's an emergency situation, call 911. That's the intention, that's the technology. But there is no call, I will not staff a call center which can accommodate 400 calls an hour, 400 calls a half hour at 1 o'clock in the morning. You can't do it. And I won't spend our customers' dollars to have, I don't even know how many call center takers you would need.
Director, you know how long people sat on the line?
Through the chairman to the council member, I do. I do. And that upfront messaging was telling them, we know you're out. We know these areas are out. I don't, human nature wants to talk to a body. I get it. We've had the conversation.
You've acknowledged at this table there's issue with the call center, correct?
I've acknowledged that there is no call center alive that can
I
accommodate
understand.
400 calls at 1 o'clock in the morning.
But don't tell me at this table, because I know you long enough to tell me that this call center is set up the way it should be set up. I'm not going to accept that, okay?
All right,
As
well,
I said through the chairman, and we will continue to learn, we
Okay.
will continue to get better. That's why Corey Jones, who is awesome, and Shelley Shockley, who is a valued public servant, are here.
all right, well,
Thank you,
Director
Thank you.
and Councilman, the call center's a topic for another day. This is regarding this
Right.
piece of legislation that doesn't have anything to do with the call center. Are you done,
Yes, sir,
Councilman?
yes.
All right, Councilwoman Spencer.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Can you all hear me through the mask? or
Yes.
Okay,
You're good.
great. So I want to thank you all for the important discussion today, and thank you, Mr. Chair, for bringing this piece back for greater understanding, and I think there'll be support to pass this piece of legislation out of committee today. I wanted to acknowledge that while we're sitting here, it looks like members of IBEW Local 38 came into the room and are seated here in the audience. So I wanted to acknowledge those members who are here in the audience. So I wanted to just reiterate why this piece was held this spring, and I think some important new information is coming to light, and we have a very tangible example of when this requirements contract may have been able to be used and may have helped. But, the challenge for us, and this is me speaking to the director, through the chair, to the director, to our CPP staff, to the IBEW members, we understand this much of your world. That's just reality. There is no way that we inhabit your world and understand it inside and out the way you do. We have to rely on good information that is inherently limited to make decisions. And I'm always open to learning more, to understanding better, to listening with open ears, to collaborate, to serve the citizens better, which is what we all want to do. And we are so proud to have Cleveland Public Power in the city of Cleveland. The chairman I'm sitting next to, every single committee hearing he is in, he says, what is in this for CPP? So we are really allies. The reason this was held in the spring is because from that limited sphere of knowledge that I do have, right? It was my understanding that there are some concerns with morale at Cleveland Public Power, and specifically it might date to back when the city did the big rollout of LED streetlights, and it was massive in scope, and so outside contractors were brought in. And it turns out the outside contractors earned quite a bit more per hour than CPP employees. And that starts to create a morale issue. That's just real. When you do not feel valued in your workplace, that is, we don't want that. We want our CPP employees to understand exactly how valuable they are. And so I think those morale questions date back a little while. I don't really know the current feeling and how everyone is doing. But my concern at the time when this was held was that this legislation inadvertently sent the message that we can just simply, replace CPP employees with outside contractors, which is not true. So, but we're back deliberating this very important piece because we don't want our residents to go through the scenario that Councilman Polensek has just described. So I think, though, just so we're walking into this eyes wide open, through the chair, first of all, it's important to acknowledge this is a two-year requirements contract. Is that accurate?
Through the chairman of the council member, that's correct.
So I would just say to all of us on this side of the table, I think we'll all still be here in 2 years at this Utilities Committee. We should just acknowledge that 2 years from now, we should be paying very close attention to how did this go? How often was this utilized? And I hope there is a scenario in which it won't be necessary in the future. I'd love to, 2 years from now, not to have to approve a requirements contract for outside linemen, outside workers. So that just putting a pin in that we're going to see each other back at the table with this question 2 years from now. I do want to ask through the chair, just for complete transparency, through the chair to the director, do we have a sense of if this requirements contract is utilized and outside folks are brought in, do we expect that they would earn significantly more per hour than our CPP employees?
Director?
Through to the chair to the council member, obviously we have to go through the competitive bid process, but historically the answer is yes.
So I think
It would cost more.
It would cost more.
Right. I don't know what they're making through the chair to the council member. You can't it's not apples to apples, right? Because it's also for necessary equipment. It's for a variety of different scenarios. So in a bid process, it kind of a force account to do the work as we do in water and water pollution control. There are a lot of pieces baked into the price, the hourly price. So I can't tell you apples to apples. But historically, I would say the answer would be yes.
Okay. So this is why 2 years from now, I would love not to have to approve another requirements contract, right?
I would love not to,
Yeah.
through the chairman of the council member, I would love not to spend $1 of this.
Right.
Love.
Yep. So I think this is part of a bigger picture, which has to do with, and we've had these important conversations at the table, and I hope we'll continue to have them about recruitment and retention at CPP. How is the apprenticeship program going? I don't know if that is coming up legislatively or if that's just something we could flag for future committee discussion, but I think things like, we all desperately want that apprenticeship program to succeed and that individuals who enter it, for them to complete it and then for them to stay at CPP. I think we'd all love to be collaborators in learning more about how that's going. Because ultimately, the question is, to avoid a requirements contract, the question would be, how many more workers would we have to recruit every year, right, to avoid this need? So I just wanted to acknowledge this is much more of there's much more of a bigger picture to this than this piece of legislation. So I have one more question. I'm really going to wrap it up here, but I have one more question through the chair to the director. So, the example that Councilman Polenzek gave, that was a very extreme storm event. It was an actual tornado on the east side of Cleveland. It was thousands and thousands and thousands of households were without power across Northeast Ohio as a result of that storm event. So my question would be, in a storm event that extreme, even with this requirements contract in place, what is the likelihood that there will be available workers? I mean, at the end of the day, if everyone's calling in their legions of folks or their out of town people, do we actually? I mean, so in a severe event like that, do we anticipate that we would be able to call, that there would be available personnel even with this requirement contracts in place? Just to manage our expectations.
Through the chairman to the council member, I mean, they would be contractually obligated to respond. So that's the whole purpose. That's the intent of a requirements contract, is that we say that we need these resources, you tell us how much it's going to cost, and then you're contractually obligated to respond within the terms of the contract. So then it would be a legal issue and a breach of the contract. But we have these across the Department of Public Utilities, millions and millions of dollars, right? In the Arctic freezes, when we have pipes breaking at a tune of 250 a day, right? They're required to respond and go in a hole in 13 degrees below zero, and they do. And our customers pay for that service. It's the same spirit here, that in the event of extreme hazardous, dangerous situations, there is an entity who is contractually obligated to respond within the terms of that contract. So our intention is a long way of saying, through the chair to the council member, yes.
So through the chair, the unknown here is who will bid. If they bid and they're awarded the contract, then that they are then contractually obligated to do what you described.
Through the chairman of the council member, that's correct.
Okay. Well, I'll look forward to following this along and for future discussions just generally about recruitment and retention at CPP.
All right, thank you, Councilwoman.
you.
And just to clarify, it's not like through the requirement contracts, we're just paying for a contract, right? It's within whoever you're contracting with pays their people whatever they're going to pay them. We're not negotiating that. We're just negotiating, here's what we need, tell us how much that's going to cost, and you don't get into the nuts and bolts of, well, it's going to be $20 for this wire or $15 for this person. You just get into the contract, correct?
Chairman, that's correct. I mean, everything we do is an effort to put the customer first.
Right.
Right, and this is another tool in the toolbox, and that's what we ask all of our employees, unionized and non-union, is the same thing. Let's just put the customer first.
All right. Councilman Harsh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple questions. So the contract is written. What happens through the chair, the director, if the funds aren't used? Are those the expenditures are gone?
Through the chairman to the council member, if the funds, so if we don't utilize the requirements contracts, then
Correct.
we don't get billed for it, so the money would remain, that it would become unencumbered cash balance.
Okay, so the contract remains. So we don't actually transfer the funds unless the contract is utilized.
Through the chairman and the council member, unless work is done.
Okay. Through the chair, Was there a final cost for the recovery effort from the tornado and the severe damages? Do we know what ballpark that was?
Through the chairman to the council member, I know there was a discussion of putting the dollar values. I don't have it as I sit here today. There were some conversations about trying to put it together for emergency response and some other funding opportunities that were potentially available nationally. However, I don't have that number.
Okay. And I know it's not exactly the issue at hand, but it's sort of in the same general field. So through the chair, do our standing labor contracts require emergency work? Do we have language in I know we don't negotiate contracts here at this table, but is CPP able to say this requires all hands on deck, everybody not sick or whatever? All able bodies need to be present, or is that not something that the department can mandate?
Director?
Through the chairman to the council member, we cannot. However, so very recently, over the last several months, and then recently over the last few days, there has been significant positive developments in the negotiations of those contracts. A fact findings report and a tentative agreement have been ratified as of about 7 o'clock last night by Local 39, which is significant. And
Okay.
in those are, again, efforts by way of all of us, everybody, to respond in times of emergency. So in the existing contract, as it were, the answer would be no. In the new contract that you will have, it will follow the normal legislative process, and you'll get the executive summaries and things here in short order. That was our intention, and believe that will be in application.
I grew up next to a lineman, and I remember vividly as a child watching him run off into storms. And every time it stormed, I could look
Scary.
outside, and the Peterson household was on the move. Last question through the chair or to the director. The language in here says approximate amount of 500,000. I'm not familiar with us using the term approximate amount in ordinances. I'd be more comfortable with a not to exceed amount. Is that acceptable to the director?
Through the chairman and the council member, we have no concerns with it.
Then, Mr. Chair, I would suggest that we amend this to say not to exceed rather than approximate.
All right, there's an amendment on the table to read,
So
what line is it?
change line 5,
No, in section
Of section
1. In section 1.
line 5.
No.
Change from in the approximate amount to not to exceed the amount.
All right, we have an amendment. Is there a second?
You with me down there? Yes. Fantastic.
We have a second. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Was there discussion? All right.
Thanks.
Is that it, Councilman? That's it. All right. Director, this became a very controversial piece of legislation on your behalf and on council's behalf. But the thing that, and I'm going to try to say this without getting into trouble, the thing that perturbed me the most about this was this became the issue or the topic amongst council and the administration while we had residents who were without a service that they deserve. I hope that this piece of legislation now gives the administration every single tool that it needs in its toolbox to assure that if something does happen, that power can be restored as soon as possible, as opposed to playing a blame game, trying to run circles around everybody. And we can disagree, Director, amongst ourselves, but when we take those disagreements out to the public and to the residents, that's where both sides have crossed the line. So I'm really hoping that this piece of legislation here gives you the tools needed, that if, God forbid, we ever have another storm like that, that the work can just be done and we can put the customers first and assure that power can be restored as soon as possible. With that, ordinance number 432, 2023 stands approved. Please sign up.
Thank you. committee
Thank you,
members.
Director. Thank you. Ordinance number 583, 2023 by council members Casey, Hairston, and Griffin by departmental request, an emergency ordinance authorizing the Director of Finance to enter into a development agreement with Sci-Fi Networks Cleveland LLC or its designee, successors, or assignees to install, operate, and maintain a citywide fiber optic network system in the city's public right-of-way for a period of 30 years with 5 10-year automatic renewals. Chief, right? I don't, what is your title? Is it
Through the
chief?
chair, it's a new position for this administration. I'll take it. Mr. Davis is probably most.
Yeah, well,
Correct.
give yourself a chief, a director,
Thank you. I'll let the mayor know.
what was your superior, whatever it is. I don't like to call people by first name. I'd rather use title. Welcome, chief, direct chief. Oh, all the chiefs are rolling in the room. We're going to tag him with that. All right, at the table, I think we have our director, our chief of finance. We also have our chief operating officer, and then we'll call you Supreme Leader Davis, since you don't want to come up with your own.
Distribute some printouts.
They've called upon.
All right, Chief, another controversial thing that we've been trying to work through with this whole technology thing that we've been going through in utilities. So, welcome to the table, and I believe you have a presentation, but if you could please introduce your guests first. Thank you.
Absolutely. And through the chair, to the chair, thank you very much for having us here today. It is good to be back here. I am Austin Davis, the Senior Policy Advisor to the Mayor. My title has been upgraded to Supreme Commander, Leader. Which I very much appreciate. Joining me today is our Chief of Finance, Chief Avanama, our Chief of Operations, Bonnie Tewan, our Executive Director for, just playing it safe, Executive Director for Ohio Means Jobs, Cleveland Cuyahoga County, Michelle Rose. Our special guests today are Scott Bradshaw, President of Sci-Fi Networks, the organization behind a lot of these efforts here, as well as Wally Grimble, who is the President of Local 71, IBEW Local 71, and their Assistant Business Manager. We'll get to them in a moment, but their presence here, I think, says a lot. Who was supposed to be joining us today but is currently in the air due to all this weather is Bill Fenton of Always Underground, the general contractor. He was here last time with the props. I'm hoping he can join late. We'll see if it works. Airlines.
The general contractor, so there's no local representation for him here?
There isn't. He's in the air. We do have the labor representation, the folks who would be doing the actual work itself.
All right, go ahead.
Good morning. We're here to discuss the offering from Sci-Fi Networks. The offering is to develop and deploy a world-class underground fiber optic telecommunication network used for the internet or anything else to every single home and business in the city of Cleveland, built and maintained using union labor and with no public financing involved. We were here in July to introduce this concept. We just went through our brief reintroduction, and I'd be remiss if I didn't point out that Dan Gallagher of Local 38 is behind us, a quick briefing on how the labor sourcing here works to really shrink it down and paraphrase. The distinction here is that Local 71 under Wally would be doing the outdoor telecom work for the installation and maintenance of this network. Dan's Local 38 would be doing more of the indoor wiring work. So group effort. Last week, this committee, courageously and aggressively, with the clarion vision set forth by Chairman Casey, voted to raise the floor for broadband connectivity here in Cleveland. We committed to our residents that all people of Cleveland should be able to access good internet at an affordable price. With about a third of Clevelanders lacking internet, broadband internet in their homes, and about a third of Clevelanders living below the poverty line, we had to zoom in on the affordability question first. And together we put into place legislation that should do just that. That's tremendous. And we should take a victory lap as that progress continues, but that's not the end of the story. We do also have to raise the ceiling here in the city as well. We have to make sure our market rate customers can get, if they so choose, the fastest, top-end, best service that the market can offer. Not just downtown, but in every one of our neighborhoods as well. We have to make sure that any internet business in the future can open up shop here in Cleveland, and still connect with the highest speeds commercially available anywhere here in the city. And we have to ensure that our residents have the most choice they can get when it comes to utilities like the internet, because choice means price, it means customer service, and it means speed. And those all need to be at their maximum here across the entire city. When we talk about the universal fiber optic and telecom network we're discussing today, we're talking about an economic multiplier to end all multipliers. This is the infrastructure, the foundational communication medium from which all jobs of the future will at some level derive. So here in the city of Cleveland, about 64% of Clevelanders have no access to fiber internet, no access to fiber lines. Only about 36% have access to the gigabit speed fiber future. Here's a map that the FCC put out. This is about 2 years old. I'll get to why it's 2 years old. The FCC changed the way they display their data, and I think this is a lot cleaner. But let's take a look at the map. This is the second page of the first presentation here. It doesn't give me great pleasure to report this, but you can see exactly where there is fiber infrastructure in this city and where there is not. The shaded in is where there is at least one provider of gigabit speed fiber optic connectivity, and the not shaded in part is where there isn't. I'm not going to comment on the specific intentions or the attitudes that brought us to this clear division here in the city, but two things. First, plain as day, we can see where the private sector has built so far until today and where they've chosen not to build, and it speaks for itself. They've chosen not to build on the east side. It's not just the east side. This is the second thing. We're missing infrastructure all over the place, but I do want to focus on that big swath of empty space where the private sector has not developed the technology of the future. But it's just not there too. It's Old Brooklyn. It's south of Cam's Corners. It's the Detroit Shoreway. It's a lot of the near west side. I live in Tremont. I bring this up all the time. I live next to the CMHA property there in Tremont Point. It may not surprise you that neither myself nor my neighbors have access to fiber. My childhood home in Little Italy on the east side does not have access to fiber. This is a universal problem. But here's what the moral of the story is. When parts of Cleveland or certain people in Cleveland get excluded, it drags the entire city down, the whole city down, and we're looking at that today. The offer before us is to fill this entire map in without public subsidies and using union labor. I'm going to digress very briefly. This is how the FCC puts out its maps today, and I had to personally stitch this together. I find it very hard to read, but it is slightly, it's updated about 18 months of additional data there. The link is at the bottom of the page, and it's in your printouts as well, broadbandmap.fcc.gov. Just take a look. You'll have some fun looking at your wards and determining where and how many folks in each census tract have access to gigabit speeds and fiber internet. But I just find these kinds of maps much clearer than the Hexagon maps, is why I'm bringing them up. So in the positive side, Sci-Fi's offering would quite literally put Cleveland on the map, if you excuse the pun. Here's our regional connectivity and fiber access. You can see Cleveland there highlighted in the purple. With love and respect for our suburban friends, we would leave them in the dust with a universal fiber deployment here in the city of Cleveland. Our infrastructure and the quality of our services that you could access here in Cleveland would dwarf that of the suburbs. If you're thinking about bringing an internet company here to the region, these days you might be thinking about bringing it to the Heights. You can see it's filled in there on the east side, Shaker Heights, Cleveland Heights. If we fill in the Cleveland map, we're going to make that company think twice about where they're moving to next. We can zoom out further. Here's our region, generally speaking. You can see Fort Wayne there in the west is pretty well filled in. I'm not too concerned about them. The city with the best fiber connectivity near us is Cincinnati, there in the bottom right of the screen. About 70% of Cincinnati has fiber infrastructure providing gigabit speeds. 46% of Indianapolis can say the same. Pittsburgh has a pretty strong fiber deployment, but they don't have great service plans on that infrastructure right now. 81% of Pittsburgh has fiber, but only about 20% have, none I think, have internet that can reach a gigabit. Columbus is more complicated. Only about 22% of Columbus has fiber access. We're actually ahead of Columbus right now with our 36%. Columbus, though, we all have to assume will get its act together sooner rather than later. That they're going to figure out how to make sure their residents and their businesses have access to these incredible speeds and high-quality infrastructure. This is our chance to solidify our lead that we have ahead of Columbus for this kind of business. And let me be clear, if it needs to be said, let me emphasize, this is an unusual opportunity for Cleveland. You might recall that Cleveland was the very last city in the state of Ohio that had cable TV. We got it in 1987, way too late. Our suburbs had cable TV in 74. Columbus had it in 77, Cincinnati in 81. We did not get it till 87. The private sector refused to build here in Cleveland until about 15 years after the suburbs. This is not that scenario. We are correcting that market failure we experienced last time around. We will have infrastructure in Cleveland and businesses to sell their services to paying Cleveland customers. What this requires of us is to sign a development agreement with Sci-Fi Networks. The agreement is pretty anodyne. It's authority. The legislation is requesting authority to sign the agreement. The agreement lays out a process behind a process for permitting. It's a commitment from the city of Cleveland to work through a permitting process in an efficient manner. It's a commitment from Sci-Fi to provide access or infrastructure across the entire city and to fix things as they go about installing this infrastructure. It clarifies the city's other commitments. There's two interesting notes. These came up last time. I'll just flag them here. One is that we've agreed to terms of Sci-Fi that are very similar to those that we have with Dominion Gas. Sci-Fi has offered to pay the city for a contractor who will be full-time focused on permitting issues for Sci-Fi Networks. We would have to issue an RFP. That contract would have to come back before this council, but Sci-Fi has committed to the funding to be the funding source for that contractor. So council, of course, will be involved the whole time, but wanted to flag that incredible opportunity before us. Time is money, and Sci-Fi sees this as an opportunity to make more. The other issue or noteworthy item is that when somebody enters the rights-of-way here in the city, they have an indefinite right to access that right-of-way. It's permanent, and it's without end. The number of years that agreement lasts for are infinity years. What we have in our agreement before us today is a 30-year agreement with 5 10-year renewals built in, so 80 years overall. Any utility company needs to be able to make these long-term commitments to make their money back on these high capital expenditure builds up front. Not just Sci-Fi, but all telecoms, the gas companies, the power companies. All those other companies don't have an end date. In our agreement today, we've built in a few more checks for the city as we go along this process. And this is largely why Chief T-Win's here, if there's any questions about the specifics of how our right-of-way agreements can operate. With that, those are my opening remarks. I wanted to frame the conversation before we went further. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Bradshaw, who will be able to talk through the specifics of the Sci-Fi offering, really going through what we discussed last time and making sure that we're all on the same page for what we're hoping to do here in the city. Scott.
So, Chair, and I do apologize.
Yeah, now I'll make sure that presentation gets pulled up. Just a moment.
Are we good? There we go. So, thank you. Very close. There we go. Thank you. So, Chair and members, I do appreciate your time again today. Maybe I would ask, through the Chair actually, before I actually go into my detail in regards to why I'm here, once again, why I'm knocking on the door with the opportunity presented before you, whether you actually would like to address the comments that were already made, the introduction was already made, or whether you'd like me just to go straight in.
Just go straight into it.
Okay. So, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to walk through a series of slides. May I just take this off you? Yes, please. Thank you so much. So I'm going to walk through a series of slides. These are slides that I believe almost everyone actually, we're here today has seen already. But I just really want to summarize the opportunity, as I mentioned previously, that is before you. So Sci-Fi Networks, we are a developer. We are not an internet service provider. We do not deal with the public in regards to providing public services, those being broadband connectivity, TV, phone, and many other services alike. We are a developer who builds out citywide infrastructure, and that being fiber optic infrastructure. And we actually deliver that through what we actually call as our brand being Fiber City. And through that Fiber City, the underlying platform of that infrastructure is 100% fiber, passing every single premise. The ubiquitous footprint ethos there is to remove the digital divide, remove that infrastructure divide, as Austin was clearly pointing out a few moments ago. You have significant segmentations of how you have been, how the private industry is currently putting infrastructure into your community, where they are choosing where they wish to put it. They are really segmenting your neighborhoods. Sci-Fi really, as we are evidencing through across the country and the investments we're already making on our Fiber City investments, we are changing that platform. We are changing that game. We are really driving equality rather than an opposite way around. So, through our Fiber City, it is a 100% private investment. That investment comes from Sci-Fi and also our financiers. One of our biggest backers is an organization called APG. They are one of the largest pension funds in the world. They manage well over $500 billion in assets. We actually, what we call is, we forward fund, we pre-allocate the money. So we don't design the city, then build a neighborhood, and if that neighborhood is very successful in customers purchasing one of many services from the many different ISPs on our network, then build the next neighborhood. We actually pre-allocate the funds, and what that really means is, once we design the city, whatever that capital cost is to build the entire city, not just particular neighborhoods, we pre-allocate all of that money. And that gives you comfort that this project is not going to run out of money. And we're not going to begin to choose which neighborhoods we prefer over others or which the ISPs may prefer. We're actually going to, again, create that ubiquitous footprint for you. Actually, come on to one of the key points. So the key thing about Sci-Fi as a developer is that what we are really looking to identify is underserved communities. And when Sci-Fi says underserved, it really is about that digital divide where incumbents today, various internet service providers, are segmenting the community with the infrastructure they're putting in, and the future-proof infrastructure being fiber optic cable. Our infrastructure is open access. It's not just open fiber where anyone can use the fiber, it's also the electronics. Sci-Fi controls the entire environment purposely to ensure it always is a neutral environment. So when I say controls, that really is from the connectivity on the data centers outside or maybe inside of the city, that connectivity going all the way past everyone's home, and that fiber then connecting to electronics within a person's home. By allowing Sci-Fi that controlling mechanism, it means that if an internet service provider would like to use our fiber to deliver maybe broadband to someone's home, they don't have to put their electronics on. We already have the electronics in place, and that serves the means and mechanisms of that internet broadband. If a service provider did wish to put electronics on that fiber, that's when we remove the open access nature, because the person that puts the electronics on the end of the fiber controls the fiber. So people can talk about open access fiber and how this is great all day long, but when someone puts those electronics on, it's gone. That open access just becomes another monopoly. And that's why Sci-Fi is really looking what we call that three-layer model, where we not only fund it, we put it in the ground, we appoint a neutral operator to ensure it's always operational, we control the electronics to make sure any number of internet service providers can access that same customer and deliver service. Every single constituent business throughout the entire city will have access to the same internet service providers. We don't allocate service providers based upon the neighborhood social economic structure. We actually say to everybody, you should be treated equally, you should have access to all the same services on an equal basis at the same price points that everyone is paying throughout the entire city. So with that said, that's how we actually create the model. So it's fiber throughout the entire city, Sci-Fi funds that entire infrastructure, that is at no cost to the city, that is our private risk. We take that fiber to actually a person's home, we will place the electronics on that fiber, the customer will then have signed up for service with one of the different ISPs on our infrastructure, whether that be a broadband, whether it be a telephone service, or whatever the service may be, and we actually, as I say, we open access that. And that's really our model on the right-hand side. Fiber to everyone, neutral operator in the middle, and then the services is, let me say this a bit differently. We're not really looking for 10 of the same things. We're not looking for 10 broadband providers. Yes, you can have that, but from the conversations, the councils, the committees, meetings I've had for many years across the country as we are beginning to roll our investments out, they're really looking for internet service providers that are offering very low-cost services, they're very premium services, but are highly customer-centric. It's all about the customer service. And really, and that's one of the reasons why we led into partnership with one of our new providers that are going to be using our network is T-Mobile, because they're very customer-centric. Their brand is all about the customer, and that's why we engaged into a partnership with them for using our infrastructure. But it's not just, I say, about the internet providers, it's also about the extra services. Depending on what state you're in, telemedicine is becoming a good thing, home security is becoming a good thing. The IoT devices, municipalities wanting to use our same fiber to actually do smart water meter reading at home. And this is the difference. If you have an internet service provider they are typically selling content. They want to sell you broadband, they want to sell you TV service. They are selling you content. What I'm doing here is creating a multi-fast lane highway that goes to someone's home where any different type of provider can provide any different type of service. It's not just broadband anymore. It's about the many utilities and IoT devices that are really available today and are coming in the future. But that is where you are on the left-hand side. You have the incumbents that are determining who receives copper or fiber, within which homes and businesses. They control the infrastructure, so they control the quality of that service. They have the opportunity to degradate that service. They control all the electronics, so it is not an open infrastructure to the last mile home. And they control not only the services they wish to provide to you, but the price point subjected to those services as well. So it is a very monopolistic environment, which is where you are. But I say I would like to, with your blessing, really bring the Fiber City model here and give everyone a fair challenge. As well as actually paying for everything, as well as actually creating your biggest footprint, as well as actually taking that fiber to the inside of someone's home with the electronics and giving every single person open access, competition and choice of who they want to choose as a service, and which, by the way, to be very clear, no one has to use this infrastructure. This is just another option for people. They can stick with their current provider if they wish, but I'm going to bring brand new competition, brand new choice, hopefully far superior customer service and lower price points to support that. So apart from that, there's also the federal stimulus of the ACP program, which is the Affordable Connectivity Program, and that's in the instance of say Cleveland here, that every person in this entire city has access to, and it all comes down to the parameters of qualification. So depending upon what the rules are for what you can qualify to receive stimulus funding by the FCC, right now under the ACC program, that is a credit of $30 per month through a partnering ISP from a resident who wishes to take an internet service. So everybody in the city has access to that, just depends on whether you qualify for that. What Sci-Fi does is goes beyond that. We take very much a philanthropic approach that we want to support real disadvantaged families, people that just do not have much disposable income. So the ACP is going a long way. That is really helping people. What Sci-Fi does is want to take it one step further, and this is an active program we have. So we actually look for up to right now, about 10%. So the ACP is 100% of your city. Sci-Fi takes it a step further, going for an extra 10%. And what we're really doing is creating a model of how we help people before it actually breaks our financial model. And we've seen that about a 10% rule. So 10% of all the households throughout the entire city, does not matter where those residents actually reside, they have access to our Fiber City Aid, and the aid being the play on the Fiber City brand. And that is a program where the elected officials, council members, committee members, you choose the parameters of people that qualify. It could be school meal programs, it could be Medicaid, it could be Social Security, whatever you feel is the most contributing factors to really help disadvantaged families, we let you choose the parameters. Sci-Fi will just subsidize it. But so by way of example right now, we actually provide fiber, as I mentioned. It is gigabit speeds to the home. If they were to combine our Fiber City Aid program with the ACP program, people that qualify for both of them will be receiving gigabit speed broadband over fiber on the Fiber City network for near zero cost a month. It's a complete game changer for those disadvantaged families, how we try to bring them back into a digital age. Oops, our network starts at 1 gigabit. As standard, straight off the bat. It is symmetrical. That is the download speed is the same as the upload speed. It is symmetrical. It's not asymmetrical where one is different from the other. Our networks at the home starts at, say, 1 gigabit. Our network day one here. So not only is this infrastructure going to change the landscape, we'd like to believe, from an economic standing for the community, it also is going to change it from a connectivity at the home perspective, because our networks day one a symmetrical 10 gigabit per second ready to go. You don't really see this across the country. There are instances, but are very far and few. From a commercial perspective, our networks are 100 gigabit per second. If we start to, and I do want to get to the technical aspect of this, from a municipal perspective, should the municipality wish to utilize this infrastructure for your own services, really the world is your oyster there, because we actually let you go as fast as you want. We will allow you to put your own electronics on our fiber, which means you are now controlling your own quality of service, your own data throughput. So it's just our fiber is going to feel just like it's your fiber and be managed in that way. As I mentioned, we are creating a platform. So the underlying platform of the fiber, yes, I'm taking fiber to all the homes and all the businesses and the church and the community centre. And it is creating competition for everyone throughout the community. But the underlying platform is smart city of a coining. And smart city means different things to many different people. So from a utilities perspective, the conversations I was hearing earlier on in regards to outages, the ability to think ahead and be proactive rather than in some instances reactive to that. This is what's happening across the country right now, where municipalities have a large footprint of fiber. They're able to work with their electrical division, their electrical energies to actually either reduce costs, identify where outages are, pinpoint that instantaneously back into their SCADA systems, looking at smart water metering, looking at digital kiosks putting on our fiber, which allows then the actual leadership of departments and the council to promote digital outreach to communities. Maybe there's going to be some road work, there's going to be some road blockages. You can actually promote that digitally throughout neighbourhoods now, different kiosks, through to the likes of controlling and managing traffic management, and also things like gunshot detection. All those are real-time information, data points that can now be brought back into the relevant departments if you were to work over our fibre. Our fibre is the platform. We do not provide those clever services, those clever widgets. We provide the fibre that enables you to have those conversations with those clever organisations out there who provide those services and bring them onto our platform if you so wish to do so. We are huge about local recruitment, local resource, and local engagement and education. So as we actually go through the engineering design of the project, we'll be employing not only working with the Labour in regards to their experience locally, as obviously we are represented, which is a great turnout today in regards to how we're going to look to build the infrastructure, but we're also looking for local constituents that we can employ to walk the streets. They can be our eyes and ears on the ground. They can act as Q&A sessions in active neighbourhoods we're going to build. So once we actually start our construction, in that particular neighbourhood, we will be rolling food trucks that we are paying on our dime. That is not a city cost. Those food trucks are free of charge food to the people in that active neighbourhood. We want people to come out and understand what we are doing. We don't want to hide this project. This is a huge opportunity for the city. So we want those people to come out, talk to each other, meet the ISPs that are going to be using this network, and ask them the question, why should I choose you over what I'm paying right now? What makes you so different? Because they don't have to switch. So it's up to the ISPs to justify to that homeowner, that business, what makes them so different and beneficial. So I say, and we actually roll those food trucks every single week for the entire project construction lifetime. We're also looking from an education perspective as how to promote the network from a community awareness. So that could be softball events, track events, the turning on of seasonal lights. We really would like your direction because you know the community better than we ever will, and how we should promote ourselves and how the ISPs should also promote themselves. And just leading on to the digital divide and the digital inclusion, Sci-Fi looks to work with staff, to work with libraries to understand what initiatives, outreach initiatives right now the city has, and I'm really putting that as a collective city of various departments, of how you look to work with children to engage them into the digital world, how you work with adults that are struggling to engage in the digital world, how do you introduce them to that environment. We have our programs. Our first one was just launched recently in Wisconsin, and actually in Kenosha, which is just a great success, and all the city officials there are really excited and talk highly of the activity that's been undertaken so far. We're actually Rockford being our nearest to your good selves. So right now, since 2019, in regards to construction and projects that are underway and various sums of money that are being allocated from Sci-Fi, we have over 42 different cities across 11 different states. And as we begin to roll them out, we'll be looking to connect over 2.4 million premises. All those premises are going to have access to fibre. The platform is no different than what I'm presenting here today. That is a citywide platform, true open access, multiple ISPs, where the constituents and businesses can have choice over what they already have today at their discretion. I'm not going to regurgitate actually what Austin was just mentioning a second ago, but yeah, I already had this in my slide deck, so I may as well just quickly touch on it. What attracted us to Cleveland is the lack of investment. The private industry from an infrastructure, the technology infrastructure is making, is quite shocking, really. We cannot put our finger on why, or what we can do, though, is help you. And we want to help you at no cost to you, but a large sum of money on our side. Really, our investment here will be well over $500 million of private investment. So you are only a third connected. That is segmented. That is not in concentrated areas. They are dissecting you, which is actually going to make it very difficult for future internet service providers to want to come to you. Because when you dissect an entire city, an ISP will look to say, okay, I'd like to come up and bring competition against your current incumbents, but if it's dissected in a certain way, it's very hard for them to write a business case, which they then overbuild existing fiber that's been put in the ground. Whereas if you just have it on the West Coast and nothing on the East Coast or vice versa, you can work around that. So I'd say right now only a third is connected. Your businesses actually is very interesting for us. That tends to be a lot lower number in this instance, but higher in fiber. You tend to find that commercial businesses do make money. They are that profit mechanism of the investment, but you're actually almost on par with how connected your residents are. So that was quite concerning for us, because the more business you can have attracted to the city, the higher the tax revenue you can generate that to be reinvested back into your community. And just based upon those public images that are readily available, so the previous one was just to show you the landscape of what it looks like at a bird's eye view. The left-hand side just shows one of the middle of the city and then started to zoom in. And as you begin to see, it looks colorful. The darker the color, the higher concentration of fiber. As we actually begin to zoom into the actual shapes, you can begin to see that clear images are now emerging, those clear images where you just don't have fiber, or the lighter the color in actual neighborhoods as well. And the bottom image is to show you what's happening. That is the dissection there of where they are putting fiber in the ground, missing large swaths of the neighborhood, then putting more fiber in a different adjacent neighborhood. And all you're doing is aberrating digital divide. It doesn't matter what I say here today and what I present to you. That is just fact. That is public domain information visually showing you what is happening with the incumbents and how they are structuring your city. And that's not a good thing. I would actually come on to Always Underground, but as Austin said right now, that my colleague is in the air.
Can you just,
Yes,
one
sir.
second, Councilman Plensic has a point.
Yeah, just go back if you could
Go back.
There you
one.
go.
I guess what I'll call the hot spot on the west side. Oh, excuse me. On the west side of the city, there is that intense dark area. What?
That bit there?
Yeah. What is that? What is there that?
So may I just go up and, would that be okay? Just,
Oh, yeah.
just for the sake of visual,
Yeah.
to make it easier. Thank you. I'll give you two examples. So we have one right here.
Yeah.
And then we have the outside in University Heights. So the darker the color, the higher concentration of fiber. Thank you. The darker the color, the higher concentration of fiber. So as you can see here, it's light because of the airport. There's a tiny bit. They've concentrated on this area under their own social KPIs, their indicators of how they wanted to invest. But as we begin to go to Old Brooklyn and further afield, there's no infrastructure there of fiber. So they're very much concentrating here and just leaving the complete east side of the city alone.
Is that because there's the concentration of businesses there? Or?
If I'm not mistaken, that's the AT&T hub, right?
Oh.
That's where AT&T.
And it wouldn't be fair for me to say that, but
But I will.
okay.
I will. It's in my ward.
I'm just okay. That's what I'm trying to understand.
Yeah. It's that's where the hub of AT&T
Okay.
is.
yeah, so if we look here, so what I did, I chose a darker area, not in my favor, but to explain to you how it works. So in this area here, as you can see, you've got spots that do look a bit darker, but what you can see is where it looks good in this area here, not so much as you begin to dive into the detail. Not so much, all I've taken is this and gone more granular here, and you now start to
Thank
see
you.
what's happening.
And just for
And then-
clarification, what you're showing there, I believe, is part of Ward 14. That's Jasmine Santana's ward. That's Clark Store Avenue, Fulton area over there.
The hospital.
No. Yeah.
Yeah. So ultimately, these are great, but this is the key one right here. These are parcels. These are actual properties within your city, and this shows you exactly what they are doing and how they're doing it. And this is readily available information. You can go and look at this yourself. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So, sadly, and I do say sadly, my colleague still appears not to have been able to join us due to weather. He was coming from Kentucky, and the reason we don't have the local representation in regards to his organisation is Bill Fenton, who you almost a number of you met previously. Bill has been working behind the scenes with the gentleman in the room in regards to working with the Labour to get the right structure, and that was really why he was here today, because of his depth of knowledge and conversations today, how we've been able to formulate the relationships in readiness for building this project, obviously subject to your blessing going forward. So I am going to just skip over, because I would do it a disjustice for Always Underground, but as we all know, they are IBEW staffed. They are highly recommended and commended in regards to their Go Shovel certification. That is a very difficult certification to achieve, a very good safety standard. You know, they are very much woman-owned. They are building millions and millions of feet for sci-fi right now in the Midwest, Northern actual territory areas, with more projects to come. And as I've just mentioned, they have been working locally to get us to a good point through the labour organisations to where we can actually look to spend these significant amounts, hundreds of millions of dollars privately, to build out your entire city. I'm just going to skip back because I really want to just get on to this piece here, which will then lead me to construction. So on the construction aspect, we're digging in the dirt, and that's the easiest way to look at it. So where you've got the grass strip, where you've got the sod, that dirt area, that's where we're going underground. We're not in the roadway, we're just digging along the dirt line, passing everyone's front yard ideally. And then where we do have to go in the roadway, we'll be actually traditionally boring straight under the roadway to the other side of the road. And you'll see some visuals in a second. The key thing about the construction is community awareness. It's about information. So all of our information is multilingual. We look for your direction and what the preferred languages would be here, and then we create that material to reflect that. But all the homes receive flyers. We have a website built for yourselves in regards to how we're going to be rolling out the actual city, the neighborhoods we're going to be building it. We do not take a preference in which neighborhoods get it first. Just be clear on how we actually build infrastructure. What we're doing is looking for how do we get to the outside world? Where is fiber coming into your city, which connects us to data centers, which allows us to then light our fiber up to which everybody can then receive service. So you could ask me to say, I want this neighborhood with fiber first, and I could absolutely go and construct with our construction partners that neighborhood with fiber. But it's a futile exercise if I can't light the fiber up for people to receive service over it. So we strategically look for where we can actually get what we call backhaul, which is connectivity to the outside of City of Cleveland, and then that's how we then begin to design the city and build out those neighborhoods. No one is getting left behind. This is a citywide project, but that's how we actually construct that. So flyers, the websites, how the construction, business cards, door hangers. If you have great ideas that people have been receptive to, we will welcome that type of material to incorporate into our kit bag. We go through the standard process, just like the engineering teams expect. We do pre-permits, we walk the streets, we work with your engineering team so they get to understand how we construct. We get to understand how you would like us to construct, the paperwork, how you want the paperwork presenting, the permit packets and applications. And then once that's in place, then we go through the due process of submitting the applications accordingly. Did you want to say something?
Oh, no.
Okay.
Hold on a second, you guys.
Okay, so just some examples of images here. So on the left-hand side, this is how we dig. So we are going in the dirt, we dig down. The middle is we have what's called the vaults, also known as chambers, and this is just where a lot of our fiber comes into and passes through, and also connects through to the actual households, our microducts.
If I may, that image on the left, I don't believe we've approved that spec because that is a micro trench and we're doing directional boring.
Yes.
So
correct.
that image on the far left is actually not applicable to our scenario here. Just want to be very clear. That's how they've done it in other cities. We've only approved specs for going underground, digging straight down and then across underneath the tree lawn. We can get into more of that in a second, but I wanted to clarify.
Yeah, and that's the reason I'm showing these. I want to show you what we're doing in the northern states. That's the key thing for us. It's all about the remediation as well. As we do get to the ADA ramps and the cross sections, yes, we are boring under them. We don't cut them. We don't wish to be replacing panels. And if we do, Bill, I remember him saying how we actually go through doing edge to edge of a replacement panel and using an outsource. That's actually a portion of what we do, or his crews do outsource on the projects, where the rest is in-house staffed. As you can see, where we actually are digging and exposing that dirt and that turf, we do put the grass matting, we do put the seeding back on and replace the sod as and where necessary. And on the right-hand side, you can see how quick it comes back as long as you follow the guidance.
But on that point, you're not doing that here, right?
So, yeah, so this is what we do in Kenosha, this is what we do in Rockland.
With all due respect, we're not in Kenosha. We're
Correct.
right here. We are not doing,
We are directionally drilling.
so that will not be happening here.
Correct, but
Okay.
the only reason I want to show you is how we bring it back to how it was, if there is an instance of that as well.
But
Because you
there's-
may ask us to change our specs, you see.
But, okay, Chief, there's no need for that because they're not going to trench, they're going to bore, correct?
Through the chair, that's correct.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Yes.
Where any above ground information, where any above ground trenching is happening, we also leave the appropriate flyers again after the fact, so the actual households and businesses are aware of how they can support us when it comes to good. The left-hand side is what we call our aggregation shelters. So we're looking at 6 for the entire city. These are actually, it's like a prefab hub. They're about 300 square feet, but the perimeter is 1,000 square feet. So we put a perimeter fencing, CCTV security, so people can access these. These are the hubs that get us to the outside of the world. And then the cabinets on the right, for the entire city, we're looking no greater than about 270 of these. All of these cabinets are connecting back to these 6 aggregation points and running in multiple directions. That's how we get what's called our mesh system. So it ensures that if someone was to take out a cabinet, someone was really to take down one of our cabinets, the information is able to reroute itself in multiple opposite directions to ensure the network stays up. So the aggregation shelters, ideally, we would like to put them on municipal land. That would just be a traditional land lease agreement. We can put them on private land, but I would rather be paying the city for use of your land. I'd rather be putting money back into the municipality rather than paying a private landlord, and then I'm being beholden upon that private entity, because this project is about the community. This project is about the people. And when I start using private land, and really back into the realm of being beholden on somebody else. So we will present multiple different locations that we know support the project, and we'll ask you to approve 6 of them and work through that. If we just cannot find any location for those actual shelters, we will put them on private land. But that's not the whole purpose and the ethos of what we're trying to achieve here. The cabinets, we look for out of sight, out of mind. That is the goal, to place them. We don't want to put them in front of people's windows. We want to ideally be putting them on parks and recs, foliage where necessary. We don't want them to be an eyesore. You know how your cross sections work, so where we don't want to be compromising line of sight when you're approaching the actual junction. So we'll be working with the engineering team to understand where best to place them during the preliminary design. So that's really is where Sci-Fi is today. And as I say, this really is just a re-representation of our meeting a couple of months back. It is well over $500 million. It is citywide. It is going to give people choice beyond what they already have now. It is going to give them brand new competition. We do have the affordable low pricing. It is 10 gigabit symmetrical to the home. That is the quickest in the country to date. You will be on a pedestal of yourself, certainly with this area. We do have that unique disadvantaged family product that Sci-Fi has brought to the market. It is true open access all the way to the electronics, not just the fiber. It is all about local labor relationships that are going to build these networks on Sci-Fi's behalf, as well as employing local people to actually be the face and the eyes and ears of the project. And we do want to remove the digital divide. So I could pull a permit. I could turn up. I could put the permit down and build this network. Make no mistakes, that is on my agenda. That I'm designing that with me in mind, how we want it built as Sci-Fi. The reason I'm here today is to get your blessing and direction, because I want to take all your departmental ideas, your initiatives you have, and put them into our network design. That is not what anyone else does. That's what Sci-Fi does, though. We want to take your ideas, put them into our network design with a view of a risk that one day you may wish to use this network for A, your municipal services, or this network does satisfy those outreach constituent initiatives. And that's me in regards to the offering on the table. And I welcome any feedback, any thoughts and direction.
Sorry, Chair.
Is that it? Does the Chief Financial Officer, the COO, have anything?
To the chairman, nothing other than to express, the excitement and support for this project. Particularly, I think Austin touched on it a little bit, the economic development potential of having this kind of internet access in the city is real and significant, and laying this infrastructure can really help ensure that we are at the table when we're competing against other localities around the state and the country for business locations.
Chief?
Thank you. I think the only thing I would add is that my staff in MOCAP, who usually processes the right-of-way permits, have already worked many hours with this group, trying to get to construction standards that we all can agree on. So, they'll still have to go through the permit process, but in principle, they've already agreed on what the process will be as far as the constructability of it and the work that's being done in the right-of-way.
So, Chief, let me ask you this. How many permits are going to be required for this? Is it one universal permit throughout the whole city, or does every tree line going to need a permit?
Yeah, I think the question is more of how many submittals that they're going to submit, as far as the work that's being done and how they're going to approach each one of those, whether it's street by street, neighborhood by neighborhood. It's kind of up to them on how they want to submit a package. I would imagine that the packages won't be that big. It won't be a whole neighborhood, but more one or two streets so we can review it and we can feel comfortable with how they're addressing each of the streets. So it's more about the packages and not permits.
So, to the chair, it is exactly as the CEO was saying, and we will look for your direction. So if I may say typically, which is what we're doing across the country in all the different cities we are constructing, we would look for a single permit to cover about 200,000 feet. And that gives us enough area that we can mobilize the crews in accordance to keep them active over that particular distance. That's going to be a moving. What we do not want to do is present thousands and thousands. That is a heavy uplift and burden on any department, which is why we're also contributing financially to the employment of people to support this project internally. So yeah, we would go slow at the beginning. So there'll be a few permits at the beginning. We want to make sure we are ramping accordingly. The documentation is as per what everyone would expect. Once staff are comfortable that we are conforming as you would expect and the quality of work is as you expect, then we'll start to ramp up very, very quickly. But we start slow to begin with.
Okay. All right. You answered one question. How many units are you expecting in the city of Cleveland?
Our initial designs runs as circa of 264,000 units.
264,000?
I think it was.
Find that.
Yeah, I'm giving you a total figure. I'm looking at smart city points, I'm looking at businesses, I'm looking at residents. I'm giving you a headline of where we're coming from.
So we would probably be your second biggest build in the U.S. since you've started.
Yes,
Behind-
Palmdale in California has just started. That's actually one of our biggest builds. But you would most certainly be
Well, Palmdale, you've only got here is 50,000
Yeah,
units.
I'm just making it, going through the numbers in my head.
So according to this,
actually be the
Albuquerque's
big-
297,000
Yeah,
units. So
just-
we would be
just trying to
second
remember.
behind Albuquerque.
Correct, yeah.
Through the chair, there's also Arlington, Texas, which is, at least has a population larger than ours, so I'm guessing they're larger in units.
Yeah, but how many units did you say were here?
I believe
In Cleveland?
based upon everything we are looking at,
Right.
including smart city points, we're running about 260,000.
Right, so that would be a second one. We'd be bigger than Arlington. According to your thing. All right. We met on Zoom a while ago, if you remember that, me, you, and Austin.
Correct.
I asked you this question, and I don't believe that you answered it appropriately then, so I'm going to ask it now, okay? Sci-Fi's coming in over $500 million to build out this network throughout the whole city. There's got to be a way that you recoup some of your money. It's not just, we love Cleveland, we're giving $500 million. How does Sci-Fi then, and I know it's a long-term plan, it's not an overnight plan for you guys. How does Sci-Fi recoup your investment?
Yes, and both hands in the air, you did call me out on that the last time we also met, and I actually didn't realize I'd misarticulated on the Zoom, and I can't take that time back. But so the way I answered it last time will be the same way I answer it this time. Sci-Fi's business model is charging the private industry to access this infrastructure. So we are not recreating the wheel, and this is not a rocket science. And this model already exists, but it's on what we call the outside of the city. So I put fiber in the ground. There is a percentage ratio that I need a number of premises in the city to buy services from the ISPs on the network. So by simple example, in the industry to date, where fiber passes residential homes, between 46 and 49% of them purchase fiber. So if there's 100 homes, 46 to 49 of those 100 homes will buy fiber service from the ISP. It's keeping the numbers fictitious. So Sci-Fi's model is we put fiber in the ground, we wholesale access to as many different service providers as possible. We have those service providers enter into long-term financial commitments.
And those would be like the AT&Ts, the T-Mobiles,
Whichever it may be.
whomever wants
Yeah,
it.
those are good reference of names, but we also have many others of a smaller nature as well, because they're very customer-centric. So as many as possible, we wholesale the net citywide to all of them. We had them enter into financial obligations for a very long period of time because it weds them to the project. They financially commit themselves to the project. That financial commitment really balances what we need to see as what we call a take rate, which breaks even the project. So that's why we don't need any money from the city. Is that the private industry is paying for it. So we wholesale it out for a fee, they pay us a fee, and in return for that fee, they get access to the network, and they can provide one of many services to a home. And that's what you have right now on the outside of your city, where an AT&T, a Verizon, a Comcast, a Charter Spectrum of the world, maybe a Charter, by a fictitious example, Charter is charging AT&T to use their copper or fiber on the outside of your city, and in return, they can use it to go to commercial buildings.
All right, so when one of those entities, whomever it may be, when they come in to want to rent space, I guess, off your fiber, do they have to rent it for the whole city, or can they just say, okay, look, on Lorraine Avenue, we just want to provide, I'm just throwing names out, so I'm not picking on anybody. So T-Mobile just wants to provide Lorraine Avenue with the service, right? Can they just purchase that section, or when they come in, once they're on your network, because you're citywide, that they have the ability to provide it throughout the whole city?
So, to the chair, it is 100% of the city.
Okay.
We do not segment by neighborhoods. The obligations are the entire city.
Okay, so if one of the other companies or your smaller companies want to come in, they have to be able to provide it to the whole city?
Correct, and that's what you want them to do. You don't want to be dissecting
Right.
it in a different way to that. So when we go through, our teams go through the evaluation of those internet service providers, there's a number of criteria. Are they financially stable? How long have they been around? What is their strategy of services they wish to present to the people? What is going to make them so different that the constituents or businesses want to buy service?
All right, Councilman Harsh on that point.
Mr. Chair, to the chair, who are your current customers in other cities that are doing this buying your service buying your access to provide service?
I actually, that's on me, I actually removed, I had it last time, I had a visual list of all the different internet service providers. I'm not sure if you actually have it. We have right now multiple on there. So I'll give you examples that are in the public domain. So we have a Washington State one, it's called Gigabit Now. They're across the country on multiple of our networks. We have a Canadian-backed one called Ting Internet. They're across the country. The closest one to you that's entered into an agreement, which is on our Kenosha website, is T-Mobile. They've entered into the fiber industry. So we have a range. So we have smaller ISPs through to very large ISPs. The way it works is we cannot dictate who's coming here. They are private entities with their own private business model. Our goal is to present you, that being you, the city, the people, in a very attractive light to the internet providers to say, look, you should stop what you're doing here and realign your marketing strategy to Cleveland. This is a great community. They don't have any access to broadband. They certainly don't have any access to fiber. Bring your services. And that's how we go through the process of today makes the project real. By your blessing, it tells the world this is a real project, and it tells our investors this is real. And then it allows us to start the conversation with any internet service provider that has an interest in your city.
So just to clarify, the ask is for the ability to burrow, right? Not trench, right? Burrow. Every tree lawn or public right-of-way in the city of Cleveland, correct, Chief?
Through the chair, that's correct. Let me add one correction I should make. On areas without trees, we may do some burrowing. Some digging. There is no micro trenching. This is getting my terminology mixed up. In the street, never in the street. No cutting into the streets.
Right. We won't.
Right. That's just what I want to clarify.
So you are saying that there could, and again, I'll just go back to Lorraine Avenue, for example. We don't have tree lawns along Lorraine Avenue or really anywhere downtown, right? So what happens in that situation?
We have through the chair, underneath the sidewalks is the answer. We'll pick up one of the sidewalk plates, dig a hole, go horizontal like that.
Okay.
Put the sidewalk back.
Yeah, so to the chair, traditional way, what you'd expect, boring, it's underground, going all the way underneath the sidewalk.
All right, so even those are boring. So then what happens if there's a tree in the way?
Through the chair, let me just clarify on the tree question. My first call when this offering came to Cleveland was to Chief Tewan. My second call was to our Commissioner for Urban Forestry, Jen Kipp, who was a fantastic asset to the city. She had a hand in writing the agreement before us. So I'll just clarify that Sci-Fi has agreed to pay for a full-time arborist for the installation of this project to be watching our crews as they are installing this network across the city. What happens when there's a tree is we have to go underneath its roots. It's part of the permitting process to make sure we're going deep enough below so we're not destroying our trees.
And have you seen some of the size of the trees? You're going down pretty.
Yeah.
Yes.
But that is so to the chair, that is the benefit of the boring machinery that we have, or the crews will have, is that they can go horizontal, but they can angle it so the actual auger will then go deeper, something like a bellow, then come up on the underside of the roots. And so we don't just use traditional methods, we're also using technology such as ground penetration radar. We're looking for those sonar detections, what gives us an idea of what is actually under that running line.
All right. Chief Tewan, do you think you could put an approximate value on what it would cost to have access to the public right-of-way for 50 years?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
This is going to be a 50-year, when they apply for their permits and access, the permits will be for 50 years, correct?
But the permit is only for the time of construction.
Right.
And once we've constructed it, signed off, then the permit is no longer required.
All right. I think
For repair access, they need permanent.
right.
But it still, it grants me access based upon the governance of the grid. So initially it'll be 30 years, and then 10-year recurrals thereafter.
All right. My last thing is the shelters and the cabinets, right? Do we have an approximate, at least neighborhood of where these 6 shelters would go and these other 270 cabinets, which is a lot?
It is a lot, but you have a lot of real estate here. You are not a small city by any shape of the imagination. And bearing in mind, my cabinets are serving, the way to look at it is between 800 and 1,000 fees of conversation premises is one cabinet. So that's how many that can serve in a diverse nature. I have the preliminary ideas of where we'd like to begin placing those shelters. The way to visualize this is if one is on the north, then the second will be on the south. If one is on the east, the second will be on the west. We're creating diverse paths into the city. We don't just concentrate them in a particular area. So it's really to create the periphery of the city in a particular way so we can diverse. The cabinets are going to be in the neighborhoods. It's just where we place them in the neighborhoods to make them most aesthetically and accepting.
How big are the cabinets?
So 4, 2, and 4.5, I think it is.
You said 4, 2, and 4.5.
So 4 feet wide,
Okay.
2 feet deep, 4 feet high.
Okay,
So
so
the
4 by
cabinets you
4
see
by 4
right
is
now,
what we're
so
looking
4 by
at.
4, yeah.
Okay,
So the cabinets you see in the community today will be of a similar nature.
okay. You have questions? All right, I'm open up to questions from my colleagues. Councilwoman Spencer.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. So I want to start just, there is, this is the second time Utilities Committee has heard this, and there's been some reticence on our side of the table it's important we're going through this vetting process, and that it's great to have the various chiefs here as well at the table showing the administration's support. I just simply want to state the reticence comes from, I really want to commend our research staff on council. Brooke Sabin is at the end of the room there. This is one of those things that sounds too good to be true, right? So it's like when something sounds too good to be true, you want to look into that and what's behind it. And we are aware of that in similar scenarios in other cities that there have been Sci-Fi has had issues in other cities, and then also it's our understanding that other fiber network providers have abandoned cities. So sometimes they start these ventures and then walk away. So I just want to reiterate that it's my understanding that the administration feels this is fully vetted. I'm through our chair to the administration, just wanting to reiterate that the administration feels that this has been fully vetted and you are fully comfortable with this current proposal.
Through the chair to the councilwoman, yes. Thank you for the question. Because it is important that we only provide our open doors for sustainable businesses, those that are looking to stick around and can provide an adequate service. I'll say, I can turn to Scott if there's any specific concerns in mind. Just 2 things worth keeping in mind. One is that anything abandoned in our right-of-way becomes city property. So we own a fiber network if Sci-Fi walks away. They have no intention of doing so because that would be a tremendous financial loss for them. But that is in the back of our heads as a safety measure. I'll get a free fiber network if you want to leave me one, Scott. I don't think you do. So I feel pretty good about that. The second one is a lot of the issues, as we vetted in other cities, came from different general contractors working in different cities with different materials. So that we do take a great deal of solace in that these California cities with their different climates had, different contractors. We are operating under different parameters here. And by necessity, our roads are different than California roads or Texas roads or Albuquerque roads. And so it's not just Sci-Fi that we've checked out, it's the general contractor always underground, the IBW labor that goes behind that.
Okay, thank you. I also want to, just for the good of the order here, repeat the obvious, but I think it's so important to make sure that I fully understand and hopefully others. We just passed a piece of legislation related to Digital C, passed by full council on Monday night. How does this infrastructure interface with the $20 million in ARPA funding that the city will now be providing to Digital C with the parameters, but $20 million to Digital C? How does this interplay with that $20 million?
Chief? Through the chair. from a resident perspective, they're going to have more options. They'll have a low-cost, good quality option with Digital C, 100 symmetrical speeds, and they'll have a blazing fast, top-of-the-line option through the various ISPs that will use Sci-Fi's infrastructure, starting at about 10 times those speeds that Digital C will be providing. There will be different price points. You can tell, I mean, Digital C was also addressing the affordability question for our residents, really focusing on the third of residents who don't have any broadband at their house, the third of residents below the poverty line, and for the rest of us who pay too much for our internet today. Sci-Fi's options are more long-term. We're talking about business opportunities, and we're talking about increased market competition to drive down market rate payers who need those higher speeds or think they need those higher speeds for any number of reasons. Sci-Fi is the long-term play. Digital C is our partner to make sure Cleveland can keep using the internet until that long-term play comes to be.
Thanks. So through the chair, you don't see it as mutually exclusive in the sense of we have certain benchmarks we need to meet with Digital C for them to draw down the funds and for them to be successful. If they are successful in attracting such a customer base, you don't believe that that would then take away from Sci-Fi's ability to attract ISP providers because just saying there's a certain number of customers out there, so we don't see that as impacting either down the road. If Digital C is successful, could this impact Sci-Fi's success down the road?
Through the chair, it's a great question, and it's the billion-dollar question for Sci-Fi and Digital C. But I'll say that our contract with Digital C focuses exclusively on the population of residents who don't use internet today, or on the ACP, which means they're at 200% of the poverty line or below. It's a different population than we talk about when we talk about the Sci-Fi Network's offering, for the most part. But the universe, the success of Digital C is focused on getting about 15% of the city that just is totally disconnected from the digital divide. Sci-Fi Networks has a strong play there. They're looking at about 10% of the city, providing that Fiber City Aid program too. But the long-term benefit of Sci-Fi Networks is for market rate payers. People who are already paying for internet today, but are paying too much and are getting speeds that aren't good enough, which I think describes me and might describe you as well.
And to clarify through the chair, it was not my impression that Digital C's only objective was to reach 15% of people who are disconnected. They are totally rebranding. They're going to try to capture a much bigger customer base. So that was not my understanding. But what I think your response does clarify is an immediate term goal or very short term goal as opposed to a longer term availability of fiber. So that's what my understanding is.
Through the chair, and I'm sorry. Yes, and I don't mean to muddle the issue. Digital C is planning to build across the entire city. Everybody will have access to their program. Our specific term sheet is just focused on their ability to subscribe the unconnected.
Okay. So one thing that we're confused about through the chair is, again, we have this $20 million investment in Digital C to provide 100 up, 100 down, $18 a month internet to residents. And it is our understanding with Sci-Fi that Sci-Fi builds the fiber and then attracts ISPs to work with them, to enter into contracts with them to provide internet. So we did not understand that Sci-Fi would be charging anything to customers at all, and we received the following in sort of the back and forth with our research staff and the administration. Provide the anticipated service cost to subscribers and households. Sci-Fi responded, that it's $65 for residents and $99 for businesses. So not knowing at this time which ISPs would be involved and so on, how are we getting $65 for residents and $99 for businesses?
Through the chair, and I'll turn it over to Scott for specifics, but those are typical entry points for other cities. When Sci-Fi has come to those cities and they've attracted the ISPs to it, we were trying to answer the question in the spirit it was asked, what can residents expect to be charged for the services on Sci-Fi's network? They can expect something like what other cities are seeing, 65 and 99. Scott, any follow-ups on that?
That's a fair comment.
Okay, so that's just an estimate based on other experiences in other
Yeah,
cities.
that's through the chair. That's just real life evidence right now of what we are seeing. What we just put a bit of colour to that. What the evidence is showing, or the material, the data coming back, is that people aren't racing to the bottom on price to the point Digital C there's absolutely a market for that wireless offering compared to the citywide fibre offering. So, but the people, the constituents, are not racing to the bottom on price. They're actually driven by the customer service and the availability of a range of services over that fibre. And then that's where we anticipate the differentiator, well, one of many differentiators coming. And actually, if I may, just in regards to one of the key differences, because Sci-Fi and Digital C, which by the way is a great initiative, do not get me wrong, and I actually really want it to be successful, because our saturation of fibre is actually going to be an underpinning for them to actually build out more wireless. So it actually works very hand in hand. It's a good project to have. The difference is going to come down to I'm not selling broadband. What I'm putting in is fibre in the ground, not just for ISPs to sell broadband to people, to like yourself and others. It's to connect municipalities, it's to connect parks and recs, it's to provide public Wi-Fi, it's to create secure layer where you can connect all your traffic signals as well and then bring that into your SCADA systems. And that's where the confusion often comes, that, Sci-Fi, ISPs are just giving broadband. That's why I always bring the smart city slide, that actually the foundation of this network over time will be a smart city infrastructure, and broadband will probably just be an ancillary component of that.
Okay. Mr. Chair, thank you. I need to use the balance of my time to talk a little bit more about potential impacts on trees. I was very uncomfortable with this, and slightly more comfortable once I heard Jennifer Kipp's name mentioned at the table. I was actually a few minutes ago prepared to tell the chair that we would potentially hold this piece of legislation, because when it went through the administrative review process, it went to Finance and Law. Public Works, AKA Urban Forestry, hasn't seen this as part of the formal administrative review of this piece of legislation. And I actually want to thank my council colleague, Charlie Slifer, for flagging that. So we were very, very concerned coming to the table today that Urban Forestry had not seen this or had not vetted this. And I am actually still not 100% comfortable. I understand the intention and desire, but we just do not have a good track record of capital projects and trees. I have, in my ward, dealt with tremendous tree canopy loss anytime a public infrastructure project comes in. It is a horrific, it has been horrific. And despite best intentions, despite, meetings, we just don't have the regulations in place, to me, it would seem, to really protect trees. So I'm a little cooled off on the idea of moving to hold this piece of legislation, but I would have a much higher comfort level if, coming back to finance on Monday, we have very clear documentation or statements from Urban Forestry about how this has been fully vetted. I understand I know there's a piece about the arborist. And also, just as a side note, if you're not going to do microtrenching, please do not show it to us in a slide, because it's terrifying. That image is not okay. And also, all the images with microtrenching don't even show trees. It's almost like trees are an afterthought. So there's sort of this subtle messaging going around that, we don't even have to think about trees. We don't depict them. We don't talk about them. So just don't, if you're not going to microtrench, don't even bother to show it to us in a slide. So I think, whether today or combination of today and Finance Committee, we need a lot more, I'd like more information about this boring process, about how trees will be protected. That has not been fully fleshed out to give me the comfort level that would be needed.
Chief, can you make sure that Urban Forestry is at Finance on Monday?
Through the chair. Absolutely. And I'll just say, we have Urban Forestry's Supervisor Bonnie Tiedemann, who can speak for Urban Forestry on this issue, but we will absolutely have Jen at the table on Monday.
If she can make it. She's a very busy woman,
Sure.
or her superiors or whomever. But through the chair. Her chief is here.
Her chief is
There's
here.
also a Director of Public Works and a Director of Parks Maintenance, yes.
So If I may, to the chair, to the councilwoman, I have to admit, when this project first started, I too was very concerned. They started with the micro trenching in the roadway, is what the first proposal was. We didn't like that, so we asked them to look at the tree lawn, and then the concerns of what they would do with the trees. When we had the conversation about every tree, every apron, every sidewalk would be bored underneath it. And if, Scott, if you can flip to that one slide where they show, no,
boring
back
stuff.
one more.
This one?
One more, go back where you were before.
I'll go back to
The
where I was.
boring.
I do apologize.
The boring.
Yeah, that one. So that's a good example. There's a conduit that goes underneath that sidewalk, and you see no cut, no trench. They didn't have to restore the concrete. They literally bore that conduit underneath that. They will do the same thing with a tree. Just to be clear, there is going to be micro trenching, but it will be in those areas that are clear of trees. So if you go to the next slide that you had before, there will be some of that, but it will be in those tree lawns where there are no trees. It will be in areas where there are no aprons or sidewalks. You can, when you think about our city, there's not too many situations like that, so open trenching is going to be the exception, more the rule, because we have trees, because we have driveway aprons, because we have sidewalks. The majority of the installation will be bored underneath it. We did talk to Jennifer Kipp about the boring, and as you know, the structures of trees don't necessarily go straight down. They're more concentrated in the top layer. With the boring, it's directional boring. You have that ability to go up or to go under those tree roots to minimize the impact to any of the roots. So we feel very comfortable after discussions with Sci-Fi and specifically with the contractor as far as how they approach it and how they're planning on approaching it in Cleveland. It's also very important that we have inspection on site on a daily basis, which is one of the commitments that Sci-Fi has. That's obviously a huge expense to us. If they have multiple sites that will need daily inspection, we don't have the staff to take care of that. So we're proposing to hire a consultant that's being paid for by Sci-Fi to help us process the permits as well as do the inspection. Those inspectors will work for the city, and they won't take direction from Sci-Fi, they will take direction from us. So we'll have somebody on site that oversees the work of the contractor.
Go ahead, Mr. Chair.
To the chief, is there a scenario where there could be a tree lawn that's been bored, then trenched, then bored, then trenched, or, because I thought we had said that we weren't trenching, right? But is there a scenario where they get to pick and choose whether they want to bore or they want to trench?
That will all be vetted through the plan submittal process as far as where they're going to open trench versus where they're going to bore.
Okay.
And to the chair, if I may, so if you remember in the last conversation we had where we had Mr. Bill Fenton, where there was even the instance of a tree, it was just in the best interest just to treat like there's 10 trees, and so don't bore trench. That's like stitching, and we don't want to do that. So we'll start at the beginning and we'll just drop it even deeper and go under the tree lawns. Something like that. And that's why, just to be very clear on the point, and maybe this is good feedback, and it's good for me going forward actually with other cities. And one of my pictures I would now include going forward on other committees is a machine showing you a rod going in the ground. That is going to be the only thing you see, because otherwise my slide deck is going to look as boring as this, because you don't see anything because it's all underground. You'll see one truck with a small rod that goes on, and the rest is just going to be picture after picture like this, because you don't see it, 'cause it's underground. And that's why I introduced this, just to show you. It's about transparency for Sci-Fi, and we wanted to show you that there may be instances, and we didn't want to hide it, and you think you're had a curveball later on.
All right, Councilwoman.
Thanks. And I think to conclude this line of questioning, Mr. Chair, I think Chief Tewan highlighted an important question I had, which was the TLC that will be needed if these permit requests are coming in batches, right? There's going to be chunks of the city at a time. I don't know how big the chunks are, right? But that would be submitted for permitting. That's a lot of work. And when we're talking about tree lawn by tree lawn, literally tree by tree, right? Can this be trenched? Does this need to be bored? That's a lot of TLC, a lot of staff time to evaluate these permit requests. And I know how hardworking our staff are and how their plates are already full. So my question through the chair was going to be, how is this influx? How are we going to have that literally tree lawn by tree lawn level of evaluation of a permitting request to make sure that the correct permit is being issued and that the correct tree protections are in place, et cetera? So through chair, was wondering if the chief could clarify the permitting process.
Chief. So, as I said before, we're proposing to hire a consultant to help us with that. I mean, you're absolutely right. Our staff could not handle all this additional work. So, understanding that this work is temporary for years and not, for decades, we don't necessarily want to hire additional staff, in-house staff. So, hiring a consultant to do this work to not only help with the permitting process in City Hall itself, but also out in the field to do the walkthroughs before they even start construction, when they apply for the permit, and then also during the time of construction to have somebody out there that if they do run into things and it's a little different than what they anticipated, that that consultant who's reporting back to us can help resolve those issues.
Chair, if I may, real briefly, through the chair, and I'll just emphasize this same point that Chief Teeman was making. These are consultants that will be paid for by Sci-Fi. This is not coming out of our tax dollars. This is Sci-Fi seeing a business opportunity here in the city to make sure their permits are processed in a responsible way. Once again, these contractors report to the city. Their city employees will release an RFP. We've done this before with Dominion Gas. It's the same process where we get extra resources to make sure things will work better. So their money, our resources.
Okay, that's an important clarification. I wanted to also then, with my last question, to clarify, are the consultants ISA certified arborists? Where does the certified arborist piece come into this?
Through the chair to the councilwoman. Real quick, on page 9 of the agreement that's attached to the legislation, it just lists a couple of the inspectors that we're expecting to have. So there's a certified arborist to ensure tree preservation requirements are met and to provide timely direction on tree-related work, in addition to up to 8 inspectors, a number of professional engineers, and then, of course, the permitting processes on top of that. So we have highlighted a number of specific jobs with a catch-all of saying, in addition to any personnel the city deems necessary, for Sci-Fi to pay for us to do the work that's needed here to ensure that our city still, has its tree lawns. So that's where the arborist comes in. It's part of this conversation as well. We're proposing to hire a number of staff, again funded by Sci-Fi Networks, to ensure that the Sci-Fi Networks project is compatible with our city needs.
So I would just say that in my experience, unless the permitting is done correctly and it's spec'd correctly up front to preserve trees, it won't matter. It'll matter less to have an ISA certified inspector, arborist inspector. So I'm still a little fuzzy on this and would just again invite clarification when this comes to Finance Committee, perhaps on a little more refinement on some of the tree, the mechanisms to protect tree canopy. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilman Harsh.
All right. Thank you, Chairman. And I'm very sorry I wasn't here for the first presentation that you all had. So I apologize if some of my questions were handled in that session. I'd like to start, Mr. Chairman, with questions about how this is financed. So through the chair to Mr. Bradshaw. You said you've got financial backing and you pre-allocate money for these projects. So through the chair, how much money are you pre-allocating for the Cleveland build-out?
So through the chair, it'd be 100% of the necessary capital to build the entire city. We anticipate that being over $500 million.
And so through the chair to the gentleman, I was reading an article about East Hartford having funding snags and progress had stopped. And that was from August of this year. So through the chair to the gentleman, what is the difference, what caused that problem and what's the plan to avoid that here?
So the funding of East Hartford is not with the funder that are funding our large-scale projects. That was a different type of funding mechanism. So I can't go into that because of the sensitive nature of it. But the funding we're using here, so the likes of the funding in our majority of all of our projects, large-scale ones, is done through our relationship with APG and their fund manager.
Okay. So through the chair to the gentleman, what project are you doing with APG funds currently?
I'd have to present you with a list. It would be rude for me not. I wouldn't want to miss anything nor say something that would be incorrect. So I can provide you that list.
Okay, through the chair,
but all of our
how many
caps-
projects do you currently have going with APG?
I would
Funding.
say right now, I believe that to be 8.
8?
But
And
eight project.
through the chair, are any of them in northern climates?
Correct. Wisconsin and Illinois.
Kenosha
And Rockford.
is an APG backed?
Correct.
Okay. And through the chair, is the Kenosha project completed?
It's only just started
It's just started. By just started this year, last year?
last year.
Last year. So through the chair, what percentage of that project is complete?
I'd have to give you the distance on that. Right now, I believe that to be several hundred thousands of feet already.
Out
Do-
of
do you mean that-
millions needed or out of?
Let me give you the. I wouldn't want to speak out of turn. Let me give you the exact figure rather than.
Okay.
If I may.
So could we get the exact figure of what percentage of the Kenosha build-out is complete? I'm just trying to understand like what the timeline is, because ultimately what I'm getting at here is, through the chair, how long does this take to complete from day one to day done?
Correct. So through the chair, the way we look at it comes down to the permitting. How many crews can we have within the city? So an average crew can achieve anything between 2,000, 3,000 feet per day on a crew. So ideally, for Cleveland, we'd like to build the entire city in sub 5 years, so 60
5 years.
months.
Okay.
If I may,
Yep.
to the chair, through the chair to the councilperson, the contract as it currently contemplates about no more than a 2-year design and procurement stage, followed by no more than 5 years of actual building.
So through the chair, we're not expecting to get started for 2 years?
Up to 2 years, that's dependent on a number of factors in Mr. Bradshaw's world.
So if I may, so through the chair, we are not turning up tomorrow. Let's say a decision was successful today, by simple example. We are not turning up tomorrow morning. The key thing after a successful decision is to engineer, as in design engineer, the entire city.
Yeah.
And then that's in line with permits. The long poles in the tent is not the construction, it's the procurement and the commissioning and relationship with the power utility. So those 6.
I was going to ask if you need, how much power you need for this.
I can give you the details on that. I don't want to give you fictitious numbers. I'd rather give you factual details that is spread across everybody on the committee. So, yeah, the power is the big thing.
Yeah.
For the actual huts, and then it's also the actual cabinets as well.
Okay. Mr. Chair, I apologize. I forgot to start with my flowery invocation. I've always considered that the 3 most important issues for communication or for the internet is fiber to door is the most essential thing for the future of Cleveland, education and the gap, and affordability. So I think that we are trying to address fiber to door here, which is a very, very important issue for the city to figure out long term. Everybody in America, everybody in the world is going to figure out how to get fiber to door because fiber is going to last us a long time. So I should have put that part up front, sorry. So through the chair, to Mr. Davis, why not use poles? Why bother with all the underground? We've got poles everywhere. We own every single light pole in the city of Cleveland. Why not string it up and be done in a quarter of the time?
To the councilperson through the chair, it's a couple things are at play here. One, the aesthetics of the city. We have an abundance of poles in the city. You look at most major metropolitan areas, they don't look like ours. They don't have poles up like we do.
But we're not going to stop using street lights.
No, but we should move away from these overground, hazardous utility lines that can fall in bad weather. We should be building more sustainable stuff underground so we don't have to look at it day to day. I mean, it's just nice to have. That's not the most important issue. The answer is it's the most, it's part of Sci-Fi Network's business plan to build underground. It's simpler, and I'll leave it to you to explain.
How is
why.
this
Yeah,
simpler?
so through the chair, it's a number of combinations. So underground it's about risk mitigation. The city's not on the hook financially for the success of this project. That's Sci-Fi.
Understand that part.
So because of that, we have to dilute the risk as much as we possible over the longest period of time to ensure the network is always physically up and active. And when you bring things above ground, you open that infrastructure to the outside elements. That could be through poles being taken down, that could be through hurricanes. As the climate begins to change, it makes it more susceptible to natural causes. So that's why we have it underground, as well as the scale of fiber itself. If we were just building a network that linear run went down a street, that would be a set amount of fiber, straightforward to calculate. We're really building a platform that we anticipate the municipality will want to use over years securely, that has to always be available, that requires so much more fiber.
I'm sorry, you're diverging into two separate issues for me. So back to underground versus pole. What happens when the fiber snaps underground?
It's diversely reroutes in the opposite direction because we have multiple conduits of fiber that allow us to actually allow it to do that.
There's a conduit running underneath my tree lawn, and when that conduit is severed in the future because some bonehead dug too deep and broke your fiber, what happens?
So depending upon actually how it's designed, if that fiber is cut, the information that's passing over that fiber just reroutes in the opposite directions to serve whatever the premise is.
So all the fiber is redundant and connected, and any break is immediately handled by a reroute of the traffic through other.
Correct, unless it's going across your lawn.
Okay. But how do you fix it when it breaks?
So because it's of a small nature, and because it's easily accessible, and we know exactly where that running line is, we can actually just come along, and it's in the dirt, it's not in the road. We can actually just put a spade in the ground, dig down to it, cut the actual duct itself. So if you think about our duct, it's like a bathroom plumbing. It's just two pieces of conduit that's pushed together with a gas seal coupler. We don't have fixed fiber cable. That's why we've moved away from the instance of quick remediation. If you have a cable that's got fixed fiber, you have to strip all that back, splice it all back together. With ours, you can dig underground, cut the duct, push it back together with a gas seal coupler, go to where the actual chamber is, fill that duct with air, and then below we actually float the fiberglass back to its destination. So it's a brand new piece of fiber that goes all the way.
Okay. So I was going to ask this too. So through the chair, this is insulated in copper?
No.
Is the fiber inside PVC? Is it inside copper? Is it inside iron? What insulates the fiber underground? What is it in?
So it's within its own duct, but it's actually within its plastic.
Just the regular rubber tube that we all see?
Just so it's traditional fiber. There's no metal.
Well, fiber is glass, and you don't just throw that in the ground,
No,
right?
you've got the glass, and then you have the outer sheath that protects it.
Which is like a rubber plastic.
Correct,
type.
and then it's got the actual plastic duct that it resides in
Okay.
itself.
And so that doesn't go in anything else. We just run that underground.
Correct.
Okay.
The only time you'd ever have copper is your tracer wire that also sits within the actual duct system as well, so we can able to trace where the
And-
fiber is.
How accurate can crews be in identifying the location of a break?
In regards to if you're above the ground now,
Right.
really, within metering today runs you about 6 inches.
So you can be within
Between
6
three
inches
and-
of knowing.
Actually, down to 3 inches, I do correct myself.
So within 6 inches of the break, a repair crew could know that the break is there, not there.
So yeah, for a number of different factors. So when we actually complete the design, we are very transparent on our material. So as we build the infrastructure, we want what we call as-built it, so we will digitize it to the format you require. We then hand over that digitized information to the city, so you will know exactly.
Okay.
All of our network is geo-coordinated as well, so you've got the actual coordinates of every single piece of running line.
Okay. Through the chair, speaking of the city, so this sounds a lot like what everyone thought cities should have done 15 years ago. This sounds an awful lot about like what people think the city of Cleveland should do now. Run our own fiber and then sell access to anybody who wants it and just sit back forever and collect, rent from all the content providers who might want to use a fiber. And it sounds like you're basically privatizing, or you're a private partner in that same concept. You're providing the infrastructure, and then users can purchase the access off of you to get to the customers. What is the cost to the city if we want to run IoT and we want smart intersections and we want to do all kinds of cool things? What is the cost to the city to use this moving forward?
So through the chair, it's more about banding. So it's based on the number of connections. So what I can say, because it's public domain knowledge, so a connection to let's call it City Hall. Over that connection, our running cost runs, I believe right now, on a monthly basis, about $40 for a connection. And what I really mean by that is there's a one-time construction fee that you pay to get from the right-of-way to, say, City Hall. And then you're paying us a monthly fee to use that fiber. The difference is it's just a flat fee. Because it goes back to my business model, I'm charging the private industry to really cover the cost of building. So I just want to extend on that. On that nominal fee, the industry charges on data throughput. So do you want 100 megabits, do you want a gigabit, do you want 10 gigabits? They charge you based upon your desperation of needs, the diversity of that, how much uptime it needs, and the speed of the throughput. Sci-Fi not only makes it a diverse route to every non-residential building off the bat, that fee allows you to go as fast as you want to with your own electronic.
Okay, so the city would pay Sci-Fi per access.
Correct, just like
Okay.
every other city.
Through the chair, have we considered giving the city perpetual free access in exchange for perpetual right-of-way access?
So through the chair, by doing that means that you're treating me unfairly to every other organisation that's putting communications in your ground. Because right now, the question I would ask back is, are you charging the incumbents a fee, a right-of-way fee to access your right-of-way if they put telecommunications in, or are you, in return for access to the right-of-way, are you expecting to receive free service for occupancy of your right-of-way?
Oh, that's interesting. So we're granting free access to our right-of-way throughout the entire city, and that has a value to it. In exchange, we will then pay to access the system that you're installing.
Through the chair to the council person, and I think Chief Tiemann might be able to speak on this more, we don't ever charge for access to our rights-of-way to anybody, ever. We charge some permitting fees, but there is a right to use our right-of-way if you follow our parameters for using that right-of-way.
And so when a utility
I'm
needs
so
to
sorry,
make a
Chief
cut,
Tiemann, can you confirm that I'm correct?
it's a really, really interesting subject. So when a utility makes a cut, do all utilities have permanent access to right-of-way to access their utility?
Yes.
They don't need to notify us.
That's correct.
I think he was asked.
Yes, private utilities do have permission to be in our right-of-way.
Okay. And so once granted that permission, it just remains in perpetuity, and that's just the way we do it
That's
with other
correct.
utilities. Okay. So through the chair, I believe you said that it costs $40. I was going to ask this directly. How much does it cost for a homeowner to tap in and say, okay, there's fiber in my front yard. I want that in my house. How much do they cost? Who do they call? How does that work? And
So through the chair, that's a very good question. So for them to receive fibre connectivity, that's at no cost to that homeowner. The only time the homeowner is going to be paying service is to the ISP that they're buying the service from.
so how do they tap into the fiber in their front tree line?
So what would happen is, through the chair, is that, let's say it's yourself, and you like one of the ISPs on the network and you want to purchase their gigabit speeds, the process will be the same. You'll go to their website, you'll choose one of their services, you'll sign an agreement to receive that service.
Sure.
What will then happen is, because it's Sci-Fi's infrastructure, that on behalf of yourself and ultimately the ISP, Sci-Fi will then pay for and install through our contractors, local contractors, to put that fiber to that person's home and connect the electronic that makes that internet work. The homeowner, like yourself, is not paying for that connection to get from your front yard.
So connection from the tree lawn to the house is included in your infrastructure costs. That's what you can, just on an as-needed basis.
Correct.
And then how does that fiber run up out of the ground into the house? What's the mechanism for getting it from the tree lawn to my...
It'll be of the where your running line preference is. So you may have a preference that on the right-hand side of your front yard, it's all grass, you want to go there. It may be that you've got a flower bed there and that's not acceptable, so you want it on the left-hand side. So when the technician turns up to discuss how you want to get from the tree lawn to your home, they'll run through the various scenarios that are available that we go underground to your home.
Okay.
And then you will sign off on one being that is what you've approved, and that gives you that audit trail that it can't be built any other way.
Okay, so then it has to drill into the house and just comes up through a conduit. and
It'll come
drills
up
into
through
the
a
side of my
conduit.
house.
You'll choose the location it enters your home, and then, yes, it creates a small hole, will be drilled through and sealed to the actual electronic.
Okay. And so my just last couple of questions, if I may, through the chair. With back to the boring. So traditionally, telecommunications sit higher underground than water and sewer, right? So through the chair, what is the expected depth of boring if everything is perfect?
So through the chair, from our perspective, everything would be running, the trench depth would be approximately about 14 inches deep.
Okay.
That's really where engineering departments and across the country, not just in isolated states across the country, have decided that is the preferred location because it's high enough, it doesn't interfere,
Okay.
nothing gets hit. And it's
So
good
through
for
the chair,
maintenance.
if we have to go underneath tree roots, if we have to duck underground, I mean, DUCK, and we'd run the risk then of dipping into gas, we'd run the risk of dipping into water and sewer lines. What happens, because we're talking about the entire city, it's probably big enough that inevitably something's going to go wrong. What happens when we break something?
So through the chair, that's on Sci-Fi to remediate. But before we get that far, we need to ensure all the due diligence has happened. So we've looked at the existing utility maps that you have. We've done the 811 locate calls, because that's all on us. We've used the likes of technology such as ground penetration radar to identify things that you may not even have on your maps. And then we make a decision is based upon the depth of the existing utilities within our running line, what would be the most appropriate approach to go underneath that tree lawn. Yes, I have no doubt there will be an instance that, or could be an instance that something is hit during that process. And the most likely reason being that because you think something's at 3 foot could actually be at 2 feet because you've been misled, and I can talk about that through fact.
Sure.
So that's why we go above and beyond what other people do. We use that ground penetration radar to look at things that you may not be aware of to give us the most informed, or place us in the position to have the most informed information. So that is on Sci-Fi to remediate accordingly.
It's on Sci-Fi. Okay, and if there's any cracked, so if you go underneath a apron, and then that apron cracks, and the resident is absolutely positive that it was because you bored underneath their apron, and you're pretty sure it wasn't, how do we handle that situation?
So through the chair, we will work with both the city and the homeowner to identify that, and absolutely, if it's clearly evidence that Sci-Fi's drilling mechanism caused that apron to crack, then it's the responsibility of Sci-Fi to make that good.
Mr. Chair, I anticipate a whole lot of residents calling upset about any number of things. It's a big city, lots of people. This is going to be hard to message. This is going to be really hard to on every single street. And there are tree lawn. There are places where curbs are not followed by sidewalks. We just have side yards running down a street with no sidewalk, and we're going to have to go through their side yard. I suppose the city has access to that. I think this is a large project, and it's going to have a lot of questions, and I suppose it's some comfort to know that the work won't start for 2 years, but I think there's still a lot to figure out about this, but thanks.
All right, thank you. Councilman Polensek?
Mr. Chairman, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My colleagues, I think most of my questions have been asked by my colleagues. So just to follow up on Councilman Harsh's line of questioning. So what would actually be, would there be a junction box? Would there be something in front of my home if I so desired to tap in?
So through the chair, correct. Our ideal scenario for the ability to identify and locate is that we'd have a small box similar to the size of this that's surface flush, so it's not above ground, and that would be where we come from the tree lawn to that, the microduct that we put in place is this small. It just sits in that box coiled. The reason it sits there day one is you may not require service or wish to have service day one, but 4 or 5 years from now, you may wish to. So Sci-Fi can, or the contractor, the appointer, can easily come back, lift the lid, see the coiled duct, and then go underneath your yard to your home.
So if you do not, decide to have the tap in, there'll be nothing in your tree lawn, correct? Or is there going to be a junction box in front of every house?
It will be actually, so through the chair, it will actually be in the tree lawn itself. It would not be on your property.
Yeah,
in that instance.
but will that be installed with the additional, when the system is put in initially?
Oh, day one, it'll be
So
installed.
every house will have a junction?
Whether it be one or one between two, it will be depending upon how we, is the most appropriate design. Correct.
Okay. And then you would,
On that point, you're talking about a box on every tree lawn?
Well, yes, because, well, there are two options. One is, our preference is to have this small box here, this surface mounted underground flushed.
Underground, not flushed?
It's flush, it's underground.
All
Yeah,
right.
so you're not really going to, it's almost like a water, sprinkle it on the outside, what you're used to. The second is what we're doing right now, but it's not the ideal, is that we just take this microduct going down the tree lawn, we geo-coordinate it, we GPS it for later on, and then we come back. The problem is then we don't want to start digging holes everywhere, maybe because the coordinates were a few inches off. We don't want to start, tearing up the right-of-way. So it is more aesthetically pleasing and has been accepted across the country that we just have this small box in the right-of-way that we just take this microduct in, coil it, and then whenever you're ready for service, we come along and bring it to your home.
But you won't be able to see it?
You don't see it.
Okay.
It is flush with the
yeah,
right.
so, and then from that box, you would micro-bore to the home.
Correct.
And is that a conduit, or is that the wire itself just goes to the house?
That is depending upon yourself. So for us, it can just be the conduit that we take. So we do like a spade dig. So it might be on the left-hand side of your lawn. You just
Okay.
want us to, that'd be the running line to the outside of your
Okay.
house, and we just spade
Yeah.
dig the small conduit.
Okay. And then has been indicated to the question to the city, they will be the Sci-Fi will have control of fiber optic in the city of Cleveland, correct?
Through the chair of the councilperson, they'll have control of their network. There are other networks present that aren't, some are.
That are already in place?
Yep, but the city won't control it. That's true.
Okay, but will the city permit any additional fiber optic companies to come into the city?
Through the chair, yes. It's our role as a city. This is a public right-of-way. As long as
Okay.
you follow our rules, you're allowed
Okay.
to use them.
Okay. So in other words, they will not gain a monopoly on fiber in the city?
Through the chair, absolutely correct. It's been the discussion since day one. This is a non-exclusive
Okay.
access to our right-of-way.
Okay. So the document, the actual agreement that was put together that we have on our screens, who was the point people or point department on this?
Through the chair to the councilperson, I was the rowing oar, but this was a large-scale effort, involved an awful lot of people from Bonnie's shop, MoCap, urban forestry, finance, et cetera.
Okay, law, et cetera.
Law, yeah.
Okay, so everybody was involved. So you feel what's being presented to us is pretty concise, or as concise as it can possibly be, and holds the city harmless from a standpoint of any liability?
Through the chair, on the conciseness, it's a long contract, but it's standard, and we needed to hack out those details. On the liability side, yes, this is where our law department was adamant that we hold the city harmless.
And based on the chairman's comments, will the council people have any input into where the cabinets are located at?
Through the chair, I don't know, I guess I'll leave that to Scott about where cabinets are best.
Yeah. So through the chair,
Fine with it.
I can't place a cabinet without a permit. That's just fact. So what we will do is present a design with the various cabinet locations. Each cabinet can actually be moved in a particular radius.
Okay.
So when we present it, let's say to engineering or council, whoever it may be, and you feel it just doesn't work in that location, there are two things that can happen. One is it's within a radius that we can just move it without needing to redesign. If it's just not tolerable whatsoever, then we will just have to redesign the area, because
Okay.
ultimately you won't give us a permit without it.
Okay. I just want to make sure, Mr. Chairman, that we have some input into where those, because the one thing, I can't, what it's called, it looks like, almost like a container that, you'd see on these trucks. And I think it's, I want to make sure that the council person, quote unquote, in essence, the community, has some input as to where those are being placed. As I had a situation where Dominion came in and put a box in front of a church in my community, which is a historic landmark, and we basically had no control over it. And there it sits, and so I want to make sure that the placement of these units, the council folks have some input in partnership with the administration. I'm assuming you're going to look to place these on public property, correct?
Yes, through the chair. Are we talking about the big 1,000 square feet or the small
Yeah,
campus?
the big one.
Correct. So we'll present multiple options where we know we've
Okay.
got, and then it'll come down to you. So by way of example, it could be on a parking lot, it could be sited on a parking recs, it could be in a DPW yard. We'll just give you options and look for your direction.
Okay. And I think as long as there's that flexibility there, that will be, it will be very important and critical. I have the same questions as it pertains. The street I live on, massive oaks, curb to sidewalk. I question, again, how you're going to get under those or around those. But I guess the proof will be in the pudding. And then from the standpoint of tree lawns, most of my streets, including yours truly, I'm very finicky about my grass. So I want to make sure the replacement grass that you're putting down is of high quality.
Yeah, so through the chair, that is what we do. We look for your direction, but you can see that
Yeah.
we take that very seriously. And we also provide that documentation with what we've put down and the best course of action to ensure it's successful remediation.
Okay, I just want to make sure, because I know that there's grass seed and there's grass seed, as I've learned.
Yes.
And I don't want to see a 1 foot line down my lawn with nothing but weeds and God knows what, and then the rest of it. So I am very finicky as it pertains to my grass, and I take care along with my neighbors. So I want to make sure that. Are we within the document, is there any specification as it pertains to seeding? What type of seeding?
I'll double check through the chair. I believe we have mandatory trainings for the remediation programs, and we can
Okay.
make sure that's part of it.
Okay, I want to make sure, Mr. Chairman, that there is quality grass seed put down, not that we have, again, a sea of weeds in our tree lawns after the fact. So, Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you again for your due diligence on this matter. I guess like with anything, like Jenny, Councilwoman Spencer said, sometimes it seems too good to be true. I hope it is. I hope it is too good to be true. That you'll be able to implement this system in the city of Cleveland and be able to service our future, present and future customers, residents and businesses alike. And the only thing I will comment, because the comment was made at the table about how long it took for the city to get cable. I was here during that whole debate. The reason why it took the city so long, because of the politics.
Yep.
It was the people maneuvering and wheeling and dealing. We could have had cable a lot sooner, but it was I don't even want to use the backdoor politics put us in a very difficult situation. And finally, a majority of council people were able to come together and say enough was enough, and finally be able to get the cable franchise approved. But that was a political wrestling match for as long as who was going to get the contract. Okay, so Mr. Chairman, again, I thank you for your due diligence.
Thank you. Councilman Kevin Bishop.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief. Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you for all the work that you put in on this piece of legislation and your due diligence with the administration. Also, really want to thank the administration for taking the lead and recognizing that as a city, we have to be proactive in getting projects like this going. And I know, like you mentioned, I'm not sure if you're the chief, but you mentioned, Chief, that we were behind 15 years on cable TV service. So I really want to thank the administration for getting this thing done. And I want to kind of back up Councilwoman Spencer and Councilman Plinsick about what this comment about if it's too good to be true, and hopefully we will have fiber optic throughout the city, and we'll be a world-class city one day soon. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilman Bishop. Councilwoman Gray.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a couple questions. I just want to echo something that Councilman Hart brought up dealing with the cost to the consumer. I just want to make something just clear to my understanding. You answered the question pertaining to the cost to the consumer. Will the cost to the consumer come through the other internet services? That's going to be the private owner to use the fiber in the ground, and that's how they're going to pay their bill through their own internet server, like like the cable, like Spectrum or AT&T per se.
Yeah, so through the chair, the process will not be any different. So let's say it's yourself and you're purchasing internet at home right now. You will pay the internet service provider whatever fee that you've agreed to for the service you're receiving. That will be the only fee you are paying. There's no fee in regards to the fiber I've paid for to get to your home. Well, not me per se, but the Fiber City project to get to your home. You're just paying the fee that you would expect, which is your monthly fee for whatever services you have procured from the ISP.
And Chair, to the committee, will that fee? I think that fee was stated on the document. Is that $65 for the resident and $99 for business, or is it? Will it be a higher separate fee to the consumer once the private sector buy into it? Will that cost be higher, more, to the consumer?
Right, so through the chair, the price I presented, which is the 65 right now, is the lowest price that we have seen being advertised from ISPs on our networks, and the 99 for commercial is also the same, and both of them are for symmetrical gigabit broadband services to the resident and to the business. On the networks that are active, where we've got businesses and we've got constituents purchasing services from different service providers, we are not seeing an elevation in those prices. They are not rising. In fact, we're actually seeing the incumbents reacting in a very positive way, which is what you want, is that now they're building their own infrastructure, which is a win-win for the people, whereas before they were being left behind. So by us bringing competition is creating an environment that the incumbents reacting in a positive way. So, and actually then it creates a market, so it's self-governing, the market, because ultimately which actually goes to the chair's question earlier in regards to our business model. It doesn't matter how good it does, that's wrong. Irrespective of how good the network it is and how great the services are, there's only a price point people will pay for that service, how much you can afford. So if the service providers on our network come along and charge extortionate prices that you just don't feel represent what you can afford, you will not buy service. That creates an environment then that the ISP can no longer achieve the obligations they have to Sci-Fi and the project. Therefore, the model we've created enables a self-economic governance of the market where they have to keep their pricing of these great services at a price point you're happy with.
Yeah, that is correct. That is correct, Chair, to the committee, and I'm only asking this concerned question is because you're coming in with Digital C, $18, Spectrum, $20-some, AT&T, another price, which is a little higher, but if they tap into this, will that cost go up pertaining to what everyone has already discussed? Chair, can you answer that question?
Through the chair to the councilwoman, that's part of why we're pushing so hard in the Digital C front, because that's locked in for 5 years at $18 a month and another 5 years adjusted only for inflation. So
Okay.
that is locked in. What Spectrum and AT&T do, hopefully they compete. And they compete on quality, and they compete on price, and they compete on speed. But competition should drive down prices for this city. So that's the hope overall.
All right, thank you. I have one more question. Pertaining to, I know this is second time at the table, and I have asked a question about jobs, who's going to be being hired, and I know we have our director from Ohio Job Means, and I just want to reiterate this question to you about job security. Will you be partnering up finding jobs for local residents in the city, when this happens?
Through the chair to the councilman, thank you for the question. I'm here for exactly that reason. First of all, I just want to say that this is obvious, but access to high quality and reliable internet is critical for every job seeker and worker in this city. But specifically, I'm here to talk about and provide some reassurance around, along with IBEW, that we have or will soon have a workforce, the people that we need to make this vision a reality, thanks in part to investments already made by this council and new funding from the state that we recently received. I'm very confident and comfortable and pleased with the job quality that we'll see through these jobs created. They're union, so we know they're safe and they're good paying. So I'm really comfortable asking residents to either connect into these jobs or to go into training so that they can connect into these jobs.
All right, thank you for the answer. And also, Chair, one more question. How soon will the training start prior to this program start, like in 2 years? What is your estimated prior to 2 years or after they start implementing this fiber in the ground? Chair, to the director.
Through the chair to the councilwoman. So for the built environment project that I mentioned and through the broadband money from the state, people can enroll now in a number of certifications, credentials, and technical training for these kinds of jobs. For this project in particular, we would be looking to Sci-Fi and to Always Underground and IBEW on the assessment of how soon, how many jobs, and then we could work towards that. But I think that's probably part of that initial planning process for how they will approach the city's work.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
All right, thank you, Councilwoman. We're going to wrap this up. I got three real quick questions. One, what is the average cost for the outside entity that you're going to bring in to be able to provide services? Or just what is that averaging out cost that you charge them to come in?
So, to the chair, that's sensitive to us and we don't disclose that.
Okay. What is your cost? And I only ask because we're trying to figure out how much it's, we know that, so it was just about trying to figure out how much residents would be charged, right? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
I could care less what they pay you. I'm just trying to figure out, okay, if they're paying $4, right, to be on your service, then we know that our residents are going to be $8. You know what I'm saying? So we're just trying to figure out the cost of that.
So to the chair, if I may just add a bit of colour on there, the key thing for Sci-Fi to attract any ISP to your community is to create an environment that is next generation infrastructure. They can offer these great speeds and great products, but also that private entity can still make a profit margin. So the goal with Sci-Fi ultimately, because it works in the business model, is to ensure our wholesale rate that we charge is the lowest possible cost, which means that it enables the service provider to still make the profit margin they want, but are then able to offer these premium services at the lowest possible retail rate. And ultimately, the lower the rate, the better the service, the greater the market saturation, which means it's good for Sci-Fi because the decision we made to make this private risk was a good decision.
Okay. And then what do you anticipate, Chief or Mr. Sci-Fi, what, I keep forgetting his name, Branch. Mr. Sci-Fi. Mr. Sci-Fi. We got Supreme Leader and Mr. Sci-Fi. So what do you anticipate the city, you paying the city? What are we looking at? 200,000? Are we looking at 3 million? Are we looking at, the cost to cover this initiative for the city? Because we know that the city is strapped for employees, right? So we know, as the chief had mentioned, that we're going to have to go to an outside consultant, right? So what are you anticipating that cost to be?
To the chair, it's going to be through an RFP process, competitive bids. Right now, the structure we have in place is that Sci-Fi is putting $250,000 into an escrow account for us to draw down upon.
Okay.
On a monthly basis, I believe they'll have to replenish it, maybe quarterly. I need to double check that. But the idea is it's going to be a high dollar contract to do all of the work necessary in this 5-year period. And of course, those contracts will come back before council.
And then if it exceeds 250,000?
That's replenished every time period. So we'll always have that to float us for whatever monthly costs we have. We don't anticipate greater monthly costs than about, I think it was 110, 120.
So to the chair, just to extend upon that, the language in the agreement is to whatever actual cost you incur has to be paid from Sci-Fi. So though we have got the ball rolling with a 250,000 stipend ultimately, if by simple example, and fictitious one at that, there is actually $1 million per month, then it's your obligation Sci-Fi to ensure you are kept whole for that cost exhausted.
Okay. And then the last thing before we wrap it up, Chief, I was a stickler with using the locals, right? So I want to hear from our unions that they're confident that this work is going to stay local as much as humanly possible, and that we're not going to have members of our local sitting on the sidelines as we're going to see crews from Indiana or Wisconsin or Pennsylvania rolling in here. We want to make sure that this work is staying as local as humanly possible.
Thank you. And to the chair, I'll invite President Grimble to talk more about this. And thank you for being here.
Yes. Yes, so my name is Walter Gribble, president of 71, and yeah, that's the focus, big primary focus. Myself and our full-time teledata rep lives in Parma. I live in Wadsworth myself, so being in northeastern Ohio, and I want to use local labor, whether that's going through working with the city to go to the JVS centers, to adult education centers, to find these individuals and get them good, stable employment. But that is a main focus of mine, is to use local residents.
And utilizing Local 38.
Yes, working in conjunction with
I hear
Local
the other
38,
thing,
yeah.
but I'm making sure.
No, there's definitely more than enough work for everybody. I want to work with them. Their ears are on the ground more than we are, and I want to work together with 38 to ensure that we find absolutely as much local workforce as humanly possible.
Okay. And we did have a meeting with Local 38, and I believe, I don't want to speak for them, however, Local 38 is comfortable with the ordeal that's being presented before us today, and that we're not going to hear anything later on, and nobody's going to be picketing anything or anything like that. So, okay. All right. With that being said, Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll on passage? Yes.
Spencer? Yes. Misha?
Yes.
Ray? Yes. Marsh?
Yes.
Kelly? Lindsay?
Yes.
68 no.
All right, with that being said, ordinance number 583, 2023 stands approved. It will now move to Finance, Diversion, Equity, and Inclusion. Congratulations.
Thank you.
At this time, the Utilities Committee stands adjourned. Just to let members know that we will not be meeting in October, but we will be meeting right at the beginning of November to go over finances for next year, for the budget and stuff like that. So if you have any prerequisites to those questions on water pollution control, Cleveland Public Power, anything like that, please get them to me or Brooke as soon as possible. At that time, the Utilities Committee stands adjourned. Thank you.